just let people in and say hello to people now.
One.
Mm-hmm. Didn't have a lot of time for this.
No, I'll be honest with you. I'm not going to lie. I have got a headache. My brain is slightly melting. I've just had a message from Deepak.
Oh, how's he?
He's saying, "Where are you?" Hello, Deepak.
Hello, Deepak.
We're here.
Yeah.
I think it's also fair to say that we've not finished yet. So we got Kirsty from Surge Protection coming tomorrow.
Yes,
she's
Kirsty.
kindly agreed. So anything that's Surge Protection related in part 4, we're going to just skip that and cover it tomorrow, which is handy because it gives me a little bit more time to actually sort through.
I was writing up earlier on about 706, not 706, was it 706? Yes, construction sites. And there's over voltage protection in there as well. That'd be interesting to have a chat with her about.
Yeah, part 8 I think is going to be like the main event that Mr. JW is covering. So we all agreed to basically take parts, and I took.
Thank you, Steve.
I took the starter for 10.
That was probably
And-
mistakes.
That was a big mistake on your part, but John and I didn't tell you this, though. We've kind of left you to it.
We're just such good friends. That's why I love you so much. No, in fairness, you know me. We've been researching this for ages anyway. So,
Well, a lot of it's in that other standard anyway. It's just which ones they were going to put in and what they were going to pick out and stick into 7671, really. So
That's true, isn't it? It's all there. It's just a case of, is it in now or is it going to be held on? Even once this comes in, there'll still be a lot we can see coming forward still, which is fun.
there's no chapter 81 to start. So not there completely. Just doesn't exist.
Hi, Peter. Is your screen working, mate?
my screen.
Presentation.
Yeah,
You're
well-
all right? You presenting okay? I was making sure. I was just giving you time, giving you a bit of time.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're all right. Cool.
yeah. So I've just moved it across one. So I'm not guaranteeing my mouse will work or anything, but we'll wing this gracefully.
Awesome.
Apologies everyone for being late. So I suppose we're better off than ever.
Yeah.
Really. So
It would have been easier if the BSI site hadn't actually done that slow as treacle thing. And, you could actually view the information in a normal way. But
Yeah, so as the rest of you have had to do, we've had to kind of go through section by section, and then it's not exactly marked up what the key things are. So we've looked at some people who've given us a bit of a nudge, such as the ECA last night. They gave us a nudge, didn't they?
well, yeah, and I would like to say on behalf of many people who've tried to access that website, in the kind part of our vocabulary, load of crap.
It wasn't
they
great.
Be
did this
ashamed of
before.
yourself.
They did this before on the 18th.
They did it on the 18th.
And
Yep.
it's like the same mistakes repeated. So
Okay, so
Disgrace.
So the format of this is pause and control of the presentation. And we're just really going to open this up. We're going to talk about key regulations, new ones. We're only focusing on new ones or adjustments, aren't we?
Oh God, if we start going into actually all the changes, we
Good.
will literally be going till 5 in the morning.
Okay, so we're going to focus on those, but we're going to spend a lot of time obviously talking to you guys. We're not going to just say here's information. So, there is a Q&A, there is chat. We'll see what we can come up with.
yeah, and if they're in the chat, do remember to put where it says all panelists and attendees if you want everybody to see it. Otherwise, if you put all panelists, then it's only us can see it and nobody else can. So
Yeah. good
just
point.
be aware of what you're who you're sending stuff to, and if you send it to us only, you might not get as many replies as you thought.
Yeah, and I'm going to apologise now because I think a lot of people, this is going to boil their piss by the time we've got to the end of these 2 days.
To be perfectly honest, though, a lot of this information was already coming if they've watched E5.
Yeah. I have to say, the good thing about all this is we've kind of, if you've watched our Future to Wine Rigs, it vindicates those Friday nights researching, talking rubbish, not recording it, and then realizing it would have made a good podcast. But there you go.
Okay.
Should we go?
Go for it, man.
Yep.
Okay, right. So, hello everybody watching, whether you're a manufacturer, whether you're an electrician, an apprentice, training, whatever level you're at. This is one of those big events which most electricians and most contractors just let that ship sail on by. This is the chance for us to have a say in the future of our industry, and the more people make noise, the louder our noise gets, the more they'll hear, and hopefully we can influence. Whether you send your comments to NAPIT, NIC, ECA, you do it direct and try and tackle that horrific website.
Yeah,
this is a chance to get your thoughts across.
Just to add this, like ECA had a link where you can answer their questions. It does say that that's for their information only. If you wanted your comments to go onto this, then you have to do it on this system, which is dog shit right now. But hopefully it'll improve after it's quietened down a bit. I made a couple of comments today, and it was very slow. But after this, you can revisit this video on YouTube. You can have a good time to think about it. We've got until what, December? To comment on this. It's not a rush.
Yep.
So, revisit this, contact us, talk about this, or maybe we can have another little chat about it over little areas. Think about it. What you don't want to do is have a load of information and then just be frustrated and then just move on. If you have frustrations, we're going to put them into proper comments.
Yeah, we can't swear anymore. They won't. If they see swear words and rants, they'll just ignore the comments.
They will.
There is a great example on the ECA website of a comment where you quote the regulation number, you quote what the regulation says, and then you give your informed view on it, and then maybe a proposed alternative.
That's what it asks for. Yeah. What's your issue? What would you like it to be? The one I did earlier, for example, in 706, I think is the one I was in, which wasn't construction. It was is that confined space, conductive location. So I need to do the regs again. I've been in it too much. One of the protective measures was something to do with SELV and PELV, and it said that SELV would be to the requirements of section. No, PELV would be to the requirements of section 414 in the regs, but SELV, it said HD 603-64-4-1 41. It didn't actually refer to section 414. It just referred to the high HD standard. And I didn't know why it did that, so I just said, well, why can't it be section 414? Yeah. It doesn't say any reason why it couldn't be section 414. If you actually go to that regulation, you'll probably see my comment when it's made public.
Yeah. So for those of you watching again, this is an opportunity for you to just get involved. And we thought one of the things about having that big barren book online is it's quite daunting when you're sitting there by yourself. So we thought we would do these webinars because the one thing we love about these webinars, it's not just three pals having a chat plus loads of guests and other people. It's all of you guys as well included. So if you're watching on YouTube, you're only getting kind of 1/3 of the overall experience here, but we stick it on because it's still part of the experience in learning and going on that journey of knowledge discovery. Mm-hmm. So most people will see on the slides, there is lots of various colors. The books, they like changing the cover of the color of the cover every few years when they release an edition. In the more recent amendment, it was so small they just did it in blank white, probably because it saves printing costs and it was a digital copy. We've also assumed that given if you follow the color coding, that this amendment 2 will be brown if you follow the sequencing. We won't know because it's a few years away from being published. So just some new stuff very quickly. The release date for this, according to the document, is scheduled for the 28th of March. So you can adopt it and use it after 28th of March 2022, and that will come along like that. And then a year later, it will be the implementation date as the 28th of March 2023. Although it looks far away, it won't be. It will just be gone in a hop, skip and jump because we're nearly at Christmas.
Also, there's a provisional date, so could change at any time. And
thank you. Very good point. Yeah. And it probably will change. So a couple of new bits in there. There is a new website. I have to do this because during the 18th, everyone went bonkers, stupidly sharing PDFs on Facebook and Twitter and every other goddamn platform. And then lots of people got legal letters from the IET because they will watch all this stuff. And you're idiots if you're doing it. I'm sorry, but you just are.
It's one of the things we're very strict about, even in our groups and communities.
Yeah, we won't tolerate in any of our groups at all. So there is a website now about fake awareness, and that's one of the new changes right at the start. But before we get into all the changes itself, I want to cover this because there's always good debates whether we're in these webinars or they're online, and it's about engineering judgment and people, whether they're too critical or not enough critical, or they're just having arguments. And I want to just remind people of this note by the HSE, because there's a reason and it's leading. The HSE welcomes the publication of 7671 requirements for electrical installations, 18th edition, and it's updating with the First Amendment published in 2020. So that's the change. 7671, the IET, i.e. wiring regs, have been extensively referred to in HSE guidance. Installations which conform to the standards laid down in 7671, by the way, not just 7671, the standards, so more than one. So all those standards listed in the back, if you conform with all of them, you are likely to achieve conformity with the relevant parts of the electricity at work regulations. Okay, and then it just says existing installations may be designed to a previous standard. It doesn't mean they will fail to achieve conformity with relevant parts of the AWR. That's always a bone of contention in a debate piece in the coding seminars we've done, and we'll probably pick it up on our last one, because we're going to do one on the schedule of items inspected, because one of the guys on Instagram, Will from Will's Electrical, asked us to do it, so we're going to do it. Now, let's turn that and flip that around, okay? So keyword, likely to achieve conformity. Okay, so page 2 of the regulations states, while the publisher and the contributors believe the information and guidance is correct, all parties must rely upon their own skill and judgment, inverted commas and spell checks, when making use of it. The publisher and contributors do not assume any liability to anyone for any loss or damage caused by any error or omission in the work, whether such error or omission is a result of negligence or other cause, and any such liability is disclaimed. So if you use the regs and there's something wrong fundamentally, not their problem. So that's interesting. And then the last part, because if you look at that statement, the statement on the last page said compliance with this document is likely to comply with EAWR, but this statement is basically saying, well, we're not really responsible if it all goes wrong. And then the last, on the same page, couple of paragraphs down, this publication does not purport to include necessary provisions of a contract. So if I engage an electrical contractor and say, please comply with 7671, the users are responsible for its correct application. It then says compliance with a British standard cannot confer immunity from obligations. Now, is that not double standards, or am I going bonkers here?
Yeah, well, it is, because they're saying this is what you should do, and then if you do that, well, sorry, it doesn't actually mean it's done properly at all. You could
It's
still
double standards. It's total double standard. And so the reason I'm highlighting that is because when people are arguing and rowing, just remember this is a guidance note under the law. That little note from the HSE is a breach of BS0, which says you can't say that a British standard is compliance with the law, and I don't know why they've not taken it out. So I'll be putting a comment
it's always
on
been
that
in there,
paragraph.
though, isn't it? It's like
But
it's like a little lazy handshake.
It's a lazy handshake, and it shouldn't be in there because BS0 says that, and that's a free to download standard. So don't think by just complying with the wiring regs, you're fully compliant with electricity at work regs. Remember that word on the slide that's highlighted, skill and judgment, our engineering judgment. That doesn't come from rules of thumb. That's about applying our logic and our knowledge in the selection and erection of an installation. Right, should we go on to part 1?
Yeah.
Drum roll. Okay, so minor changes. There is lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of changes. Some of them are really, really minor. Some of them is example, Regulation 11011. The scope adds the term dwellings next to residential premises. Are people really arguing what residential premises is? So they have to put the word dwelling. I know it's insane. But there you go. So dwellings is now an addition in 110.1. Okay, so that's the first very, very minor change to this regulation. The second one, 110.1.2, which again, it's the scope, and it adds installation and support of fiber optic cables. So
no, I like this because obviously this is talking about the types of systems and types of circuits that are within the reach of 7671. And I have experienced, especially when doing training, a lot of times when I talk about things like data, I'll mention fiber, and some clever dick in the room will go, yeah, but fiber is not a cable. It's glass. It's not a copper cable. You know, there'll be some smart aleck.
Yep.
So this kind of brings fiber optic wiring systems, which is a common sense approach, into the scope.
Yeah, and I think this is a good thing because let's face it, even in domestic now, fibre optic cabling is a thing. So why not put it in there? And if that falls down and gets tangled around somebody in a fire, well, it's just as dangerous as anything else. So.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the smart home capability now is in the grasp of every single electrical contractor out there. You've now got that Art Smart Academy, which are doing training for guys. You know, that network's growing. We knew it was coming 5 years ago, but now it's genuinely picking up and growing. So part 110 is it's general scope. And so it includes residential and also installation support. I got a picture of a linear fire clip there because they're pretty awesome cables. I've actually got one here, right, as well. But yeah, they're pretty good. So yeah, that's 110.1. Now if my mouse works again.
Nice and simple.
There we go. Next change. I've put some really flashy pictures in because had to really. To be honest, it'd just be boring looking at all text. This regulation 131.2.1. So the note has been removed about LV basic protection being protection against direct shock. So what does that mean? Well, the note in red with the cross out lines.
It's
for low voltage installations, systems and equipment, basic protection generally corresponds to protection against direct shock. What does that mean, lads?
Well, in older editions, we refer to the methods of protection as indirect and direct contact.
We did.
And obviously, when we standardise, we change the terminology to basic and full protection. And we've always mentioned with basic and full protection descriptors, in brackets, we've referred them back to direct and indirect. And they've obviously decided that's finished and that's past its time.
Well, it's the death, isn't it? It's basically the death of direct and indirect shock. So those who are of a certain age, when we remember basic and fault protection coming out and we laughed and sniggered, fast forward 10, 15 years, it's now bye-bye.
But this is interesting because I was reading BS 7288 just last week, which I think was amended in 2016 or so, and direct contact is still mentioned in there.
Yeah, well, that just means an excuse to re-update all the standards and sell them again, doesn't it, really?
Yeah, nothing has really changed here. It's just that they've taken out the two notes.
They've retired it.
The rest of it's the same, so
yeah,
just getting rid of obsolete bits.
The terms direct contact, dead. It's now basic protection. Why does my mouse never work? And yeah, there we go. So this is indirect shock.
Yeah.
So basically two very minor changes, 13121, 13122. It's just the crossing out and removals of the notes about direct and indirect shock. Nothing's really changed.
How many of you guys in the chat can remember direct and indirect contact? How many of you guys are in the industry? A few yeses here.
Glasses.
Yeah, so there you go. It's for old boys like us that can remember that. And we'd often describe them still as direct, indirect. And we're supposed to call them basic and full protection, and that's what's happened here.
I think you can. I'll tell you one thing.
Stop it. That's what they're doing.
I'm learning about the regs. Is there seems to be generational shifts in terminology and phrasing,
and skill, unfortunately.
I will probably still be calling it direct and indirect for many years to come. But apologies. There we go. I can see now.
Well, again, I mean, to me, it's a great way to describe the element of risk to a client.
Yes, it is. It's really simple. Direct and indirect is easy, but for an electrician, basic and fault protection is our language.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there's still some credence for using it. I mean, I'm not going to stop using it to explain basically simple language. But yeah, so that's pretty much kind of the changes in part one. There's not as much as we thought, Dave, was there really? We thought there was going to be a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, let's bear in mind that as you say a lot of times, part one does change a lot of the whole book. I mean, they even start changing the fundamental principles. No. Yeah. So, I'm not too surprised.
We know from our research that the fundamental principles have been redrafted in 60364, which is the parent standards. So it's inevitable, I think, if we're not in Amendment 2, it will be in Amendment 3.
Didn't they even come up with a new name for it? Or something.
What do you mean? Sorry, what?
Didn't they come up with a new name for it altogether? I need to dig back into that. They came up with a new name for it in 60364. In a revision. Anyway, I digress.
They did. They did come up with a new name. Well, we'll cover it. We'll look at that tomorrow. We'll give people a refresher tomorrow. Part 2. Oh dear, my mouse. What's going on my computer? So part 2
definitions.
New definitions introduced. So we're not going to dwell on these too much because there's loads, but we thought we'd give you a quick summary. So in the scope, caravan holiday home. is added onto the caravan definition.
Yep.
Evidently, loads of people have had sufficient rows to make this a thing.
Yeah, I've got experience working in this industry. Obviously, mobile
Okay.
homes or caravan holiday homes are mobile units that are transported to a location, so they are fabricated to consider that transit. So the requirements are similar to caravans. So a holiday home or a mobile home does have to have the same kind of criteria. They're not just normal homes.
So a caravan holiday home, just for everyone listening, is a trailer leisure accommodation vehicle used for touring, designed to meet the requirements for the construction and use of road vehicles. So yeah, also see definitions of motor caravan and leisure accommodation vehicle.
I mean, caravan was always there. They've just added caravan holiday home to the caravan definition.
Yeah, what used to be called static caravans in some places. Yeah.
I could have put a much funnier picture.
Thing is,
in there,
you go to one of these sites and you call it a caravan. They go, "Oh no, don't call it caravan." I got chased out of many of these places for calling their house
holiday lodge or something now, isn't it?
Or a luxury,
high class.
What's next?
Okay, buddy. Right, consume unit. Look, do any of you guys want to read through this? So this is the consume unit as it is currently defined. I don't know why they've changed this definition, but it's a particular type of distribution board comprising a type-tested coordinated assembly for the control and distribution of electrical energy, principally in domestic premises, incorporating manual means of double pole isolation on the incoming circuits and an assembly of one or more fuses, circuit breakers, residual current operated devices, or signaling and other devices proven during the type test of the assembly as suitable for such use. So it's a really long-winded way of saying manufacturer's own assembly.
Okay. Well, in the new one, the key thing here is they've added the term by ordinary persons. Particular type of distribution board intended for operation by ordinary persons. That's the key thing. Type tested coordinated assembly, which I think was in the old one, for control distribution of electrical energy incorporating manual means and double pole isolation. That's what they've done, is they've added this type of user.
Yeah.
That's basically the only change. The rest of it's pretty much the same. A few words have been swapped about, but it's the ordinary person's bit, which is the
homeowner, isn't it, or similar?
Yeah. So we're not going to dwell on these, but there are new definitions introduced, which JW is going to cover tomorrow in depth. So there's new terms like efficiency measures, electrical energy management system, emergency switch off, foundation earth electrode will cover today. Generating set, load shedding, metering, protected escape route, switch.
Yeah. And all of these are new because they've been brought in with a new part and new chapters, which we cover tomorrow in part 8. So there's no point expanding on these definitions right now. We'll cover them when we use them in part 8.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these won't make a lot of sense unless we put it with the other stuff anyway, because it's all new in part 8. So we'll cover that tomorrow.
So yeah, operating mode, different source of energy, prosumer, hooray! Prosumer's electrical installations, reverse feeding mode, rural environment, suburban environment, urban environment, electrical energy management system, and efficiency measures. We're going to blow your brain tomorrow with this because this is brain melter, and I'm going to predict this now, and I'm sure tomorrow you guys will agree with me. This is a new city and guild with all this part 8 stuff.
Before we move on, I'm looking at the chat. So Paul said, so are they saying, back to the distribution board, are they saying that other types of distribution boards are not suitable for ordinary persons?
Well, I don't think they are. I think it's this very specific thing of consumer unit is now for ordinary persons, and also they've taken the bit out about it being in domestic premises. So it could be somewhere else.
Okay, so I'm going to argue that, John, because consume units are not allowed to be used by my staff on my railways because they're not skilled nor instructed in the operation of it. And if someone's connected to the end and they go in and reset it, they can kill someone.
Again, those persons are also ordinary persons because they haven't got any other.
I know.
They haven't got skill or instruction.
That's fun. I think that's flawed. So no, that's a really good comment, Mr. Brewerton. Very good comment, actually. So I think I'm going to make a comment on that.
Is it 60439 or something? One of them says that the main switch has to have double pole isolation. That's for ordinary persons, I believe.
I can see operation of the main switch, but not in the workplace. And that's the thing.
So why are they taking out the bit about domestic then? Because it said before it was primarily for domestic use. Yeah, principally in domestic premises. So
Well, I think
So maybe
it's
they're trying to
because-
leave domestic and go into the small shop and the other kind of public environment
well,
where they're still ordinary persons.
in fairness, I've always called a consumer unit where the final circuits are distributed from. So anything before that has always been distribution boards or
That's how it works
something.
in my mind, because that's the point of
Yeah.
consumption.
But I don't like the ordinary person stuff. Yeah, that's. Yeah, no, that's a okay, Mr. Brewerton, you've kicked it off now. But yeah, okay, so that's a good comment actually. I'm going to make a comment about ordinary persons.
And Wayne's added, is the consumer unit thing linked partly to caravan parks as the hookups can be reset, etc., by the users? Again, it's likely that this is why we need to identify ordinary persons, and ordinary persons. I think the issue is if we think of persons, if we label equipment for dwellings, that obviously is referred to specifically residential. If we label as personnel of ordinary, that is obviously dwellings, but it's also caravan hookups, and it's also small shops, and it's so you can have a larger reach. And that's probably why they're going more down the personnel route.
The trouble is, Dave, on this consumer unit definition, that must be in breach of a lot of company management systems, because in a company management, electrical safety management system, if you are commercial industrial, you don't want ordinary persons operating your distribution. You will have a policy and a process that says, in the event of a power loss, checks will be made. Don't have ordinary persons playing around with boards.
Well,
Yeah.
Again, technically, persons, technically in the work environment, any kind of maintenance or checks would come under electricity regs, and there would be some level of authorization.
Yeah,
Roles and
that's true.
responsibilities.
the other thing in like an office, is that actually a consumer unit? Because say, until this thing, it was not. It probably wasn't, even though it might be the same sort of thing. It was mainly consumer. It was mainly a sort of domestic type term. So
We're just upsetting ourselves now, aren't we? In this,
not very clear, is it?
no,
Yeah.
no, it's not very clear. We're just upsetting ourselves. But yeah, well done, Paul Brewer, and that was a good. So new definitions. We've covered this. So I'm just gonna. We should all take a bow and pat ourselves on the back. This
yes.
slide that anyone will remember from our future of, because consumer of electricity and producer of electricity, consumer, prosumer, it's in the book.
We
So-
picked this up by studying 60364, and we created
works.
presentations which we delivered at Alex, and that's the
works.
point. It worked. We looked, instead of waiting for the industry to kind of, you've seen how the industry's done it today. There's some information on their websites, but then they want you to go to this thing that doesn't bloody work. It's frustrating.
Yeah, it's wrong. And John's got so upset, that's him done. He's just walked away. He's got so upset about it, he's just got up and walked, bless him. Don't worry, we apologise, it's live, what can you do? Here's a new one. So I think this is quite an interesting one. Connected mode. So be prepared in these 2 days to have your minds blown, because trust me, we have today had our minds blown, which is why I've got a headache. Connected mode. Now, we referred to it in one of our podcasts as electric vehicle to grid, and it's an operating mode which needs connecting to the public network. Direct feeding mode and reverse feeding mode are terms. Now, if you look there, you can see there's a charger, there's a battery, there's a home.
I think vehicle to grid is isn't that like a commercial term?
It's the commercial
reverse
term
feeding
for
mode.
this, yes. So, for instance, in that picture there, which is a great representative, that could be your car at work. And your car could be helping feed and offset a demand on the grid, potentially. Either way, this is going to be financially incentivized.
I saw just on LinkedIn yesterday, there was a long-going debate about the infrastructure, the network not being able to account for all of this additional demand. And a couple of people commented about vehicle to grid. When you combine vehicle to grid with prosumer, it's the only chance the network grid has for us going to fully electric.
Yeah, this is definitely going to be needed, and it doesn't mean that your car is going to be outside with a flat battery in the morning either, because once you've got a sufficient number of electric vehicles, if you say a million electric cars or electric vehicles generally, if you say just took 1 kilowatt hour out of each one, that's a huge amount of energy. But individually, it makes almost no difference. That's only about 4 miles of driving. So nobody would notice individually, but say 1 million times a kilowatt hour, that's a lot of power.
And so it kind of links to the big picture. So everybody's been rejecting smart meters because of the level of autonomous control they will have. There's this new term in EMS. If we're going to be prosumering, there is going to need to be a level of connectivity so that the I don't know what you call them, the overseers of the electrical industry, the DSOs, can monitor and manage and offset the grid. And we'll cover that in a slide. So we also have direct feeding mode, which is pure prosumer. So that's the operating mode in which the public network supplies the prosumer. So that's currently what we do now. So anyone who has solar panels on their roof, technically that method of supplying you is now a direct feeding mode under the terminology used in 7671, because the public network supplies a prosumer currently. So if you have solar or microgeneration or whatever, that's what the term is that applies to you. You are a prosumer. We also have the term, finally, direct lightning strike. It's lightning hitting Crossrail's offices. Lightning strike impacting a component of the network directly, excuse me, throat's going. There's two notes. Examples of components of the network are conductor, tower, substation equipment. And note 2 is consequences of a direct lightning strike include thermal, magnetic, and mechanical effects of the discharge current, as well as the surges relating from its voltage drop along the discharge path.
And obviously some of this will be discussed in part 4, but as we said earlier, we're going to skip the whole subject of lightning and over voltage. We're going to save that for Kirsty tomorrow.
Yeah, so Kirsty, if you're watching, you've got a shift. Indirect lightning stroke. Finally, this is one of the errors and omissions as far as I'm concerned from the 18th. We talked about stroke, but it wasn't in the regs. So indirect lightning stroke is a lightning strike that does not impact directly any part of the network, but that induces an overvoltage in that network. So that can be just one to the ground where there are cables beneath. And there's a note and it says consequences of an indirect lightning stroke for electrical installations are the associated overvoltage and the energy content of the surge wave. Henceforth, electricians, we need to know the difference between a strike and a stroke and the impact. But I think slowly we'll get there.
This should have come in way back in when 18th edition was introduced with the SPD push.
Yes,
for us to understand strokes better, to then understand why we need to select SPDs for a variety of purposes.
Because this is the one that's far more common, because this is where it says strikes the ground and then the energy spreads out in a huge distance. I think Kirsty said it was like a couple of miles.
Yeah.
All the energy is going out somewhere. So that's probably far more likely than something, say, striking a building and destroying it. So definitely should have been there on the last one.
Indeed. My favourite one,
DSO.
Nearly 5 years ago, I found this in a document, and if you do your research now, you will see that the DNOs are moving towards DSO. They have been for a number of years. It's about, apparently, according to Ofgem, giving them more versatility. Now, the traditional electrical journey, and I love this slide, shows coal, nuclear, etc., standard generation onto the national grid, transformed down, for distribution around the country, transformed down again for industrial commercial use, transformed down again till it gets into your home. The future electrical journey, and this is why I love this as a visual, is you have your traditional generation, which just can't cope. Because years ago we had inductive and resistive loads and everyone sat and watched Coronation Street, and then millions of people switched on the kettles for tea and it dropped, and they had mitigations and measures in place. Now we have technology which produces harmonics, which creates leakage issues, more switching demands, far more complex electrical installations, and we generate. So we're pumping energy into the grid. So you look there, you've got the traditional distribution, step down, transmission. You've then got large industrial scale wind farms, solar farms, which then contribute to that transmission. The megawatt farms that exist there at the moment. You've then got feeds that can connect it to overhead lines. You then go all the way down into domestic home, and look at the domestic home. Battery storage, solar, EV cars, microgeneration, Tesla walls, all sorts of wonderful generation methods. All of that needs to be regulated, because you can see from the traditional journey, it was linear. It was now it's not. It's forces opposing and trying to synchronize, and the sine wave being manipulated and chopped, and it's a lot more complex.
As we're talking about this, Sean had a question. This kind of, I think, goes back to the vehicle to grid thing. He says, I'm confused by the concept of having lots of extra load on the grid to charge EVs and the relatively small offer of energy they might return to the grid. I do, however, get the buffer at peak times they might offer.
Okay, the deal with extra load is that if you look at the actual total usage in the UK electricity over the last 10 years, it's actually dropped by something like 15%, mainly due to use of better energy efficiency items. So in terms of extra load, it's only going to go back up to what we were doing anyway. So we're not talking about adding this massive extra pile of consumption on top of the existing one, because say it's already falling anyhow. And then, which we'll do tomorrow, one of the other concepts is you're not necessarily going to plug all your cars in at 6 o'clock in the evening when people get home from work and destroy the entire grid. It's all going to be carefully managed through smart systems so that they only charge when there's a sufficient amount of extra generation available. So it's not plug in 3,000 cars in the street and the whole grid goes off.
That's the key, isn't it? And that's why they must talk to the network.
Yeah,
they must talk to the network, so the network can obviously see the demand and it can actually then manage it.
But it gets more than that. So I was on a webinar the other day about G55, which is probably the first time everyone listening has ever heard of it, potentially. And this is a Energy Networks Association document, which I have sat somewhere here. And what G55 is basically, it's a document that is trying to deal with if you look at the bottom right of that picture, all of that equipment is chopping and manipulating the sine wave that comes into the building. It's exporting a inverted sine wave back onto it, trying to match it as best as possible, producing lots and lots of harmonic interference. That harmonic interference is putting massive strain on the transmission and distribution systems. We don't think of it like that, but we are. Everything used to be 240 volt resistive inductive. Now it's not. It's 12 volt, 24 volt, 5 volt. That's all it is. And that is causing chaos on the wider distribution.
Sean has just found a link for it and put it in the chat for you.
God bless you. You can see it's a brand new document. It's their interpretation of the EMC regulations, EMI directive, and Mr. Skern would shoot me if I didn't say that. So if he's watching, love you loads, Paul. And to be honest with you, I only found out about it a while ago, and it has blown my brain because it makes you realize how, I think we've always said this, is that mutual interaction of protection and fixed loads, but think of it in a bigger scale. Imagine a street of smart houses generating, switching the supply in and out. It will cause chaos on the network as well.
Yeah.
Right. My favorite picture of all, John's holiday home. It's island mode, which is the operating mode in which the prosumer's electrical installation, PEI, is disconnected from the public distribution system but remains energized. Excuse me. Note, an island mode can either be the result of an automatic or manual action of automatic protection of the result of a deliberate action, or the result of a deliberate action.
I like this one because basically, I mean, if you've got solar panels at the moment, if there's a power cut, then what happens is the solar inverter shuts down within 5 seconds, whatever, and you don't have any electricity. However, with this system, and it's assuming you would have probably some kind of battery storage as well, if the grid goes off, your house can stay on and you can use all the stuff in it and gloat over your neighbours who haven't got any of this equipment installed. So no power cuts for you, and all your neighbours have candles.
This is one of the significant differences that things like the Tesla wall has started to introduce, because obviously when PV came out 10 or so years ago, it was all about feed-in tariff, connecting it to the network, but you needed that AC supply to power the inverter up. This is nothing like that. Here, that PV system's connected to a storage system.
And the storage system doesn't have to be a big pile of batteries in your garage. It could actually be your electric car. Because if you think about, say, a Nissan Leaf, which is a fairly low-end electric vehicle, has a 40 kilowatt-hour battery in it. Average usage for a home in Britain per day is about 10 units of electricity, about 10 kilowatt hours. So if you run your house for a day and use 10 kilowatt hours, that's only a quarter of the charge out of your Nissan Leaf.
There you go.
Significant.
So the island mode and John's holiday home is not available for anyone who wants to go there. Sean on the chat has said goodbye PME for island mode. We'll get onto that on part 8, but the term bye bye baby, baby goodbye comes to mind.
Part 8 is a big can of worms, basically, which we'll deal with.
We've got to come on.
And that's when I'll start moaning about training.
You will be.
Part 8 should be a week course, I think, for having a look over it so far. So.
Yeah. Right.
So we've been gentle so far. We have been gentle with you. Part 3. So the only real change to part 3 is this. So the existing wording of the regulation is there, 301. An assessment should be made of characteristics. Part 3 is kind of like the forgotten part, in my view. We don't refer to it enough. Basically, checks and balances before you do your work. There's a nice little addition.
I've always referred, when I do training, I always say to people, this is your pre-work survey. You know, this is how I try to train it, because it's collecting all that information that reflects, you know, you look at the fundamental principles and then you do the survey and you collect the information. But some people just go right past it.
So Richard Emery is in. Hello, Richard. Island mode's been scrubbed. You scrubbed generating UPS operations for years. I'm not surprised, because it came from 60364 part 8-1, and that's been around for years.
But again, UPS systems need to completely be able to island, you know, they need to operate independently of anything else, which is what island mode is.
The point with that, in the part 8, it specifically states that UPS and standby systems are not included in what's now in part 8. Those are still a separate standby type of thing.
They still generators, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's made the distinction between UPS systems and sort of standby generators to what is now going to become the sort of...
It's only took them 20 years.
Basis. So, but we'll do that tomorrow anyway. So
these characteristics of part 3 shall be taken into account in the choice of methods of protection for safety, chapters 41 to 44, isolation and switching 46 and section 537, and the selection and erection of equipment 51 to 56. So it's just some additional checks, basically, and that's pretty much the only real amendment to part 3.
Yeah,
which is handy. So gentle so far. There are typos and spelling and capitals, lowercase to capitals, and vice versa, and some other bits and bobs. But we thought we'd get onto the meat and veg of it, because you guys are you're going to love this. So everybody should know this regulation, or hopefully refer to it in the big blue book, which is 411312, protective equipotential bonding. And it states, currently this is the existing regulation. In each installation, main protective bonding conductors complying with chapter 54 shall connect to the main earthing terminal extraneous conductive parts, including the following: water, gas, other pipework and ducting, central heating and air conditioning systems, and exposed metallic structural parts of the building. We obviously go to chapter 54 for sizing of said bonding conductors. Metallic pipes entering the building having an insulating section at their point of entry need not be connected to the protective equipotential bonding, which, as you can see the picture on the right, everyone's like, oh, why are you bonding that anymore, etc. We're actually currently got a series of podcasts where we actually discuss bonding. I think the bonding podcast is out in 2 weeks, but yeah, we've discussed a thing. There's one on bonding coming up, and this is kind of one of the technical themes for our podcast.
The thing is, everything above here, the top half of this was original, and then I don't know if it was the 18th edition or previous, but then that line with metallic pipes was just squeezed in.
Yeah, a bit there.
The insulating section, it was a bit of a...
Yeah, it was a bit of a sneaky squeeze, and obviously they've decided to completely reapproach that.
So, but then it said connection and lightning protection shall be made in accordance with 62305, which we know from speaking to our friends at Dane. You may have to connect it, you may not, depending on the lightning protection system and method of application. Where an installation serves more than one building, the above requirements shall be applied to each building. And to comply with the regulations, it's also necessary to apply potential bonding to any metallic, and I have evidently lost that the end bit of it there. Sorry about that. Yeah, that's what happens when you've only got a few hours to prepare a presentation.
Was that potential bonding to any metallic what?
It's
metallic.
It was sheath of a telecommunication cable and get consent to the operator.
I don't know why that's dropped off. Sorry.
Sheath of the telecommunication cable.
Yeah, that hasn't actually changed that bit. So it's
none of this. This is the existing reg.
Yeah.
This is the new regulation, folks. So it now states in each building, incoming, outgoing metallic parts which are liable to introduce a dangerous potential difference and do not form part of the electrical installation shall be connected to the main earthing terminal by protective bonding conductors. Example of such are metallic water, metallic gas, other duct. So that list stays the same. When non-metallic pipes, e.g. plastic, enter the building, so this bit's been reworded, enter the building and are then connected to the metallic pipes within the building, i.e. the photo on the right, the metallic pipes within the building do not require protective bonding. What's everyone's view on that? because it's changed at the top in each building.
Yeah, well,
Incoming, outgoing. If we just flick between the two,
they've added the word metallic to each of the different things. So
main bonding conductors complying with. It's now in each building. Incoming, outgoing metallic parts.
Well, I think the reference to building is an improvement, because you've got the situation where you've got your garden shed or your workshop down the garden, and then it's like, is it part of the same installation or is it separate? But now it's like, here's a building, here's a different building, therefore you're going to do it.
And they've obviously added the mention of dangerous potential differences, which helps us understand more about what we're trying to achieve with bonding, because that's not there before.
Yeah,
it'd be nice if we could give us more about how to determine what dangerous potential differences are.
That's my big bugbear with this. I like in each building, incoming, outgoing parts, nice, common sense, but introduce a dangerous potential difference. I need to understand the context of...
Is that just slapstick 50 volts, or is that something else?
I actually can't think of anything that could be, so maybe if people in the chat could. Daniel Casey's turned up, so we'll thank you all for watching, and we'll see you later. No. It's... I don't know. I think if it's fair to say, in our bonding webinar podcast, I actually do talk about still believing in the principle of EBODOS, because a building that's subdivided and is of a reasonably large scale, I'm still a believer that all of those pipes should be bonded to a common main earth terminal, regardless whether the income is plastic or not. I know I'm old school, and don't shoot me, but I would bond it, period. I just would, to be perfectly frank, because if it goes through a brick wall or something like that, if it's plastic on plastic and there's a little bit of insert, absolutely not, pointless. But I would apply my engineering judgment to more than just that photo. I would survey the installation. I would look if the rest of it's copper, yeah, I'm bonding it. So it's going to be fortuitously bonded anyway via some method or means.
Yeah. Sean says, shouldn't we be determining whether it's extraneous before deciding not to bond?
Yeah, we could.
And that's kind of the central point of all of this. It's not about having a list of bond this, bond that, don't bond something else. It's you've got to look at the individual circumstances. So, and as for putting an example of plastic being non-metallic, I mean, really, do we really need that? Because I think we can understand what metallic and non-metallic actually means.
Yeah.
Are there any non-metallic things that are not plastic that are used for water pipes?
I think there is, actually. I think there are some
asbestos
water pipes that you can get. No, there are water pipes you can get that are plastic lined, but they do have a thin metal, like a component in between the plastic. I'm pretty sure I've seen them in some push fit systems. So I could see why they've probably put that in there, but yeah. So there you go. So that's kind of one of the small, but obviously interesting.
It looks like a rewrite at first, but actually, when you look at it and compare, each building is a good thing. The potential difference mention is good, but I'd like more.
I would bond it if I was on site, I can guarantee. Yeah, I wouldn't bond it. So I'm just reading some of the comments. I've got them above the camera here, so forgive me if I'm always looking up, trying to look at the comments, because this is about everybody having.
I wanted to return to an old comment. I think this is referring back to island mode and PV and vehicle to grid. There was a question before it disappears from Wayne. So the EBs will need to start putting the 100 amp fuses back in instead of replacing them with the 63s or 80s. Do you think that they'd have to start replacing, if you've got a 100 amp fuse holder, most likely it's going to have an 80 amp fuse behind it. Do you think they're going to have to start putting them back up to 100 amp?
So if you remember, during our webinar on DNOs, we identified the Energy Networks Association document, which tells you whether or not, excuse me, it tells you what cutouts they can actually upgrade for EV and what ones are suitable for EV, because that document was written for EV installers. So please, when you finish this, if you want to know more about that, just look at the webinar and DNO intakes, and the answers are all in there. Basically.
A good one here from Terry Austin. It says, does bonding, where not required, introduce any additional danger? And the answer is yes, it can. In some cases.
If Peter's still running, he's thinking in his head, yes, yes, yes. Someone say yes, because I know he's always pushing that one.
Yeah. If you've got, say, a metal table in the middle of a room, it's not connected to anything, it's got no potential whatsoever. If you then bond that, you've now introduced that earth potential into that room and put it on the table. So now you've actually got something which is now connected to the earth, which wasn't before and doesn't need to be. So you've now got a big chunk of metal someone's going to be hanging on to with a iron in the other hand or something, and that's going to make that situation worse. So definitely, yeah, it's not a case of bond everything as it might have been quite a long time ago.
Again, this is a term. This is a term I use in the 2391. Over bonding. It's something I think inspectors should look for. If you think about simple science and principles, where you think about how electricity works, 230 to a 0-volt reference. If that metal table before wasn't 0 volts and you've now made it 0 volts, surprise, surprise, electrical current will flow to that now. So if you can make contact with that table post bonding it, then you've made it more dangerous.
I think it's fairly evident earthing and bonding is incredibly dangerous because we both know as well, Dave, that you can also encourage circulating currents as well via incorrect configuration of bonding. And that's the term I always use, is when you look at bonding, you have to configure it. In a domestic home, I personally would bond any service, whether it was plastic or not, just to make sure that I have EBADOS. Yes,
cage.
Which EBADOS still exists, by the way.
Yeah.
It's just worded differently in the regs. So that's what I would do as in my applied engineering judgment. In commercial industrial, I would absolutely look to not do fortuitous or indirect bonding or wasteful bonding or introducing wrong bonding conductors. I think it's fairly evident on commercial industrial installations, if you have damage to the cabling that's supplying your installations, you can get diverted neutral currents through your bonds. It's quite a complex subject, but again, it's application of skill and judgment for each individual installation. Stop looking for rule of thumbs.
A lot of equipment is now going down the functional earthing route. So there's lots of currents being designed to go into this earthing.
Yes.
So, let me just quickly scan. What have we got here? Richard says, I just test it. This is regards to the extraneous conductive parts, I believe. I would as well.
I used to.
David's mentioned the 22K test.
Or 23, depending on which book you read.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's true.
Oh, dear.
Yes, if your body is 1,000 and then you add it onto, whatever. Anyway.
Add the 1,000 on top.
Shall we move on to the real controversy?
Yes.
Yeah, we've not got
okay,
started,
so what
really.
we want to do is we want to cheer you up. So what we thought we'd do is we would cheer you up with the greatest regulation ever written, 42117. ARC fault detection devices conforming to BSEN 62606 are recommended. Hooray! Yes! Oh, damn, this is in the current edition. As a means of providing additional protection against fire caused by ARC faults in AC final circuits. And this is what kicked off the row. Premises with sleeping accommodation. Define sleeping accommodation. Really? Seriously? Locations with risk of fire due to the nature of materials, woodworking shops, stores of combustible materials, locations with combustible constructional materials, fire propagating structures, and locations with endangering or irreplaceable goods, museums, zoos, etc., stuff like that.
Mm.
So I thought that was a pretty good example. I thought the sleeping accommodation was a little bit naughty because it just blanketed any house with a bedroom or anywhere with a bedroom.
Very clever wording.
It was a little bit naughty. We went on our little journey, didn't we, Dave, where we decided to zip over the Europe and actually ask them what this means in English and how arc fault detection works.
We did weeks of research as well, though.
We did lots and lots of research. So what we thought we'd do is we'd just kind of remind everybody very briefly that an arc fault detection device is looking for damage or breaks in single conductors. So if there's a damage in a flex and there's just one core, that's not going to trip overcurrent protection. It may not trip earth leakage protection. It could be damage within the cable. There could be small damage that cause leakage between conductors, which wouldn't be picked up by an RCD, but would do sufficient damage to allow carbon to deposit, the PVC to break down. That would allow carbon to form. That carbon becomes the fuel. As the copper melts, it oxidizes, forming a gas. Source of ignition. If it's over 2.5 amps, boom, you've got the perfect recipe for a fire. There we go. There's my special effects budget blown. And we'll get the drum roll in a second. What it also does is it can protect against damage, trailing leads, but more importantly, white goods. Now, we're not stupid. We know the committee for 62606 is made up of white goods manufacturers. And it's fairly evident I don't see arc fault detection as a bad thing. I see it as the next step in protection of electrical installation. What becomes very prohibitive is the cost. And also from our research, JW, you are the store of our AFDDs. They're all slightly different. The Siemens Electrium one is 1.5 amps. Then you've got some that look at just the line conductor, some that don't look at the neutral conductor. These things are designed for a domestic market. There's no 3-phase, so you can't use them in commercial or industrial. They don't have the necessary pollution category for commercial or industrial either. So they have their place, and we've kind of had this rule of thumb recommendation of, well, if the standard says 2.5 amps or even 1.5 amps, they're no good for lighting circuits, showers.
This was our main frustration, really. I mean, we understood the technology. We tried to find the best ways to get that technology delivered to us.
Yes.
To understand. The guys at Eaton did a great job.
Yeah, they did.
They really did give full
And
transparency.
Electrum, in fairness,
and,
as well.
And last night I did a Schneider CPD. I went onto the Schneider website. I did a Schneider CPD just for 45 minutes or so, just to go through it a bit more. Our problem really was the translation of 62606 to BS7671.
Yeah.
The 2.5 amp to having illustrations of light switches. That was our main boggle. They've revisited this now.
The trouble is
we were concerned though, because we did see evidence of them becoming mandatory in Germany. Mandatory was a common thing, so we're not surprised with this.
Yeah, they are mandated in a lot of just generally European countries. The problem is, and let's be honest about it, the one thing that this journey taught me was manufacturers have a language, and that language is marketing. Electricians have our language, and we can't talk. It's like me speaking to a German, and I don't speak German. And that's one of the biggest problems in the UK. In my personal opinion, the manufacturers have lost touch with how to talk to electricians in a way that levels them up, empowers them with the confidence to use their skill and judgment. But that's changing slowly, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah. Peter says, still here, stop bonding everything for the sake of bonding.
Pete, we'll always disagree on this one, and there's a reason behind that, but you'll find out tomorrow. Right, so here's the new reg. Yay! No, arc fault detection shall be provided. It's now a shall, everybody, for single-phase AC final circuits supplying socket outlets and fixed current using equipment not exceeding 32 amps. So 40 amp showers, boom, forget it. There's a surprise. AFDDs conform to 62606 are recommended for all other final circuits. However, AFDDs may be omitted where unexpected disconnection of circuit would cause danger. For example, the exciter circuit of a rotating machine. So, John, don't be putting one on your home. The supply circuit of a lifting magnet. Why would you have a lifting magnet in a domestic home? Because these are not commercial.
This list is junk, isn't it, basically?
This list is
the
junk.
list is from protection against fault current, where there's emissions for safety reasons. There's a list in there about reasons for safety why you may want to emit protection against overload current. Why would we not want it to turn off? They've copied that list, pasted it, add light circuits.
Hang on a minute. Let me just go and switch off my lifting magnet, which is over there. It's an essential part of my office.
I don't know. That's what they've done.
Okay, so a circuit supplying a fire extinguishing device. Absolutely. A circuit supplying a safety service, such as a fire alarm or a gas alarm. Totally agree. Circuit supplying medical equipment for life support. Are you on life support in your home? I don't know. In medical locations where IT system is incorporated, this list is pants. But you can see the ones they've added. Lighting circuits in dwellings. Oh,
but again, I mean, no. This isn't just for dwellings. So, although the way it's worded,
this compliant with the standard. They want to
push it to to nurse homes and all this stuff.
I can see light commercial from an EMC perspective, but until they get the pollution category up, I couldn't ever use these on a railway. But lighting circuits, showers, pointless. Immersion heaters, do you use it enough to actually warrant the cost? Because remember as well, you look at that little LED on the front there, that uses energy. So there's a hidden cost of ownership with arc fault detection device. So if you get a 10-way board full of AFDDs and you've put it onto someone who's in social housing, for instance, and it's going to cost energy to run those microprocessors, because in these devices, there's a little microprocessor that looks at that sine wave, looks at the waveform, and knows what a good arc is and what a bad arc is.
Well, can you join the dots that points to BS7671 there? Can you find a place in BS7671, a regulation that for me to comply with would force me to not select an AFDD?
Sorry, are you talking to me here or everyone
yeah,
in the group?
Because obviously you're talking about environment, you talk about categories. That's not here.
Yes.
The information you've just gone through is not here
Hang on.
in this regulation. So
No,
which
it's-
regulation would we go to?
Hang on a second. Give me a second.
And when are you and Paul going to do that podcast on?
Don't you even start. Don't you even start. I'm waiting on Mr. Skirm. And Mr. Skirm's busy man. Compatibility of characteristics, section 331.1. I would suggest is the bit that kind of covers that. 332 electromagnetic compatibility. It's one of them chapters that we don't really look at much, but I would use that.
We need to do a little
Build my
digging on
case.
that, dude, to actually pick up the information that then people, when this comes in,
On the list.
will have to. Huh?
It's on the list. Do you know how many
It's on the list.
things we've got to do? It's mind-blowing. We're going to
I've
do
run out of paper,
webinars
my
for the
list ran
next
out.
2 years. We're just researching and webinaring.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry. So where used, AFDD should be placed to the origin of the circuit to be protected. With the use of AFDD does not obviate the need to apply one or more measures provided in other clauses in this standard. I think that's a typo. Maybe my typo. But there you go. Apologies if it is. Let me just check actually what
That's actually what it says.
No, it's obviate.
Oh, right. Oh, okay. Great, because I
Obviate
use the
the
term
need to
obviate
apply,
all the time, don't I?
Yeah, that is right. A couple of the comments there. Richard Harrison's put, so AFDDs are only domestics. Surely it's all circuits, installations, S32 amp. Well, yeah, it doesn't actually say domestics, but as we pointed out before, these AFDDs are not actually manufactured to put into industrial locations. So it's, although it doesn't say they're domestics, they basically will end up being, and also they only go up to 40 amps anyway. You can't get
But
them
this
above
is
that.
the extra bit of learning we've got to think about, is to understand why a typical device, the 60626 or 61009 that's combined with it, won't be suitable in certain environments.
Yeah, it comes down to pollution categories. But yes, I agree. It is in the standard 6606, which has been amended. We know they're working on the three-phase version of this device. But yeah, I think there's quite a way to go. For me, I'm this one I'm going to be commenting on as in basically jog on. Simple as that. Shall, I think, it's going to, my biggest concern with this becoming a shall, we've not taught the industry enough as to how to select and erect this. And by making it a shall, you could take really good, honest, decent electricians and price them out the market. Because they'll be offering this in line in 2 years' time and saying the regulations require this. By the way, your fuse board has now gone from, I don't know, let's say 200 quid for a board to now 750.
Yeah.
If not more.
The that ECA website with that awful questionnaire on it had an interesting question. It said, do you feel mandating AFDDs will be a benefit? And then the question is, who's going to benefit? Certainly the vendors of these AFDDs are going to benefit if they're made mandatory, because they'll sell.
Well, I've actually got a poll just like that here, so let me do that. There you go.
Wait a minute, John. Are you suggesting that the manufacturers are going to benefit from these amendments?
Well,
There you go. Do you think AFDDs are of benefit? Multiple choice, so you can select a couple of answers. Yes, no, costs too much. Only where engineering.
Yeah,
judgment
answer the
deems it
question, guys.
necessary.
If you can, please, that'd be great. The trouble is I think the technology is good. The principles of it are great. The principles of protection are fantastic. I can't fault the principle of protection, but for me, it's good selection and action where necessary, because if I'm going into someone's house and they can barely pay their electricity bills, I'm not putting AFDDs in. I'm not. I'll stick with Type A RCBOs, and that's about the limit of what I'll go to.
The problem you've got with that is obviously the industry is going to, when this comes in, the industry is going to give you the value, the numbers of fires. They're going to give you every year X amount of fires, and they're then going to ask you how you're going to then not select this device that's been mandated now to stop that.
So let me be really controversial. This device is deemed as almost a completion of the method of protection of an installation. Now, when RCDs first came out, they were supplementary. Yes. They then became mandatory on pretty much everything. But they have been seen by many a person, and we've had many a comment put to us, RCDs are mitigation for poor workmanship. Could this be the arc fault detection is mitigation not only for poor workmanship, but for poor white goods? There's a benefit there. But what happens is you could then go and get cowboys, people who don't really care, installing these left, right and centre, and not being held accountable for their substandard level of work.
So you've hit
Sorry, have I?
a sore point for me there.
Sorry.
Which you understand where I'm coming from, and that's white goods. Now, I remember a year or two ago, no, probably more than that, contacting a company called Firetrace, and they were on Tomorrow's World years and years ago, and the guy owning, you know what Firetrace is?
Yeah.
It's that goes in panels, and obviously that it has the gas and it takes out fires. They put it in TVs back in the old rear projection TVs, and they tried to bring them into appliances. Obviously with cross borders and harmonization, none of that obviously happened. But ever since then, I've always paid attention to white goods, and I've looked at the data. And obviously, I know a lot with the fire service, and I look at the numbers of fires, and I just see this as another way of trying to fix another industry's problem.
Yes, it is. It comes down onto the contractor who, and remember the start of this webinar, guys, this book is not indemnified against any errors. It's not compliance. It's all down to you. This comes down to how you select and erect. There's a question about EV. I wouldn't put this on an EV circuit. Why? Because most EV circuits are hardwired in armors to devices that have their own protection. I don't see this giving any real benefit on a 10-15 meter runner cable, to be perfectly frank, that's wired in armored and installed by a competent installer, to be perfectly frank. My biggest worry about arc fault detection is we work and live in a completely unregulated industry where there is no impact on poor installers, and there's no visibility of what happens to piss poor installers. And by putting additional levels of protection, yes, we protect the public, which is good, absolutely no doubt, but we are in kind mitigating piss poor white goods, mitigating piss poor installers, and it's the contractors, the good ones, that will end up paying in the pocket, and that's not fair. If the introduction of this, and there was introduction of more spot checks or some sort of governed industry, then I would have no problem with this whatsoever, because what we would be able to do is wean out the bad ones. And also the industry bodies should be doing more to tell consumers, if you have a registered and qualified electrician, you will be using this, and the costs are going up because your technology is causing chaos in the homes, and the fire statistics are going up. But you and I both know fire statistics are a nightmare to get hold of nowadays.
Sorry to butt in. Do you think people like the CPS obviously have a way of dictating a standard for their members, should maybe push things like this upon their members?
Sorry, say that again.
Do you think people, companies, organizations like a CPS should push things like, oh, you must install AFTDs upon their members instead of giving them the choice?
Wasn't there a question the ECA asked that the other day?
There was something going down that area, yeah.
They were saying about, should all installations comply with a minimum? There was reference to, should installations comply with a minimum?
Because you kind of came round to that there, where you were saying that these organisations should tell the clients, that they will do this. They should be
saying, if you're having your installation rewired from 2020 onwards, this is the minimum to expect to see from a good contractor. Then the good contractor won't feel or be told they're ripping people off, because they'll have that same information. It's the hearts and minds of the consumers that the industry bodies are not doing enough. So when a good contractor comes in and says, I'm going to subdivide your installation to deal with earth leakage, I'm going to give you an RCO board, it's going to cost £300, piss off, I'm getting a 70 quid board from Screwfix. And the guy, what does he do? Does he pay his bills? Does he not pay his bills? It's not fair to be putting people in that situation. This is where the CPS schemes are failing our industry, because they're not representing the people who they work for enough, in my opinion. Just my opinion. I'm sorry, I know I'm going.
I have many opinions, but I agree with everything you've just said.
Sorry, I'll say it there. Shoot me. What can you do? Probably will, actually. So if I disappear, you know what's happened.
The EV thing is quite interesting, the electric vehicle charging, because the actual 230-volt circuit is all the way up to the vehicle, and it includes the 5 or 10 meter long big fat lead that goes from the point to the vehicle. So they might be a benefit there, because if that lead is outside, it's going to get trailed on the ground and damaged and busted and driven over and who knows what else.
Yeah.
Then that could get damaged, and that is a high current circuit. So there may be a case to have them on electric vehicle.
And we did see in the very early ones, where we just had those stupid plugs and the sockets weren't changed for the 30 amp sockets weren't.
So the granny leads, didn't they?
Yeah. But those 30 amp sockets weren't replaced for the ones for EV. And I remember doing a few talks, and the pictures were just of these sockets were getting very, very hot. And
Yeah,
obviously
they will
that
do.
creates a point
So
of
we're not
failure in the
designed for
connection.
this. And
Yeah.
now finally there's guidance that says it should be on a designated circuit, which it was always in the standards anyway. But just going back to this, for those who are learning AFDD, this is a great visual. It just shows that circle of protection. So we have, for those who do, so old school MCBs, which deal with overloads and short circuits. So we have thermal and magnetic protection within a standard MCB. And that used to be enough. When I was an apprentice, it was just that. Then we went to these RCDs, which were supplementary. They're now mandatory. Deals with earth leakage, as you can tell the term here, earth tracking currents. So unintentional leakage of the installation. It deems it an imbalance. Potential fault, protects the end user. Fantastic. We now have surge protection, protection against over voltages. And that last part of the circle, arc fault detection device, which deals with the arcing. So the series connected breaks in cables, etc., the parallel leaks, which an RCD potentially won't pick up. So you have a complete circle of protection there. So that's just for those who are learning. Again, you have to consider these as you go through your process of elimination as to how do I select and erect what's best for my installation.
Let me just see what the chat's saying.
Sorry, yeah.
Okay, where did the AFDD question start?
I agree with Simon Doe to an extent. I think independent, there needs to be an independent oversight body, because these companies they are for profit, and so they will always have an agenda as of some form, and consumer safety should be absolutely paramount. Membership is membership. If member does wrong, they should develop them, help them, support them, put them on an improvement program. It should all be transparent. What was it, Dave? We spoke about ages, people having sanctions, licensing, transparency.
Yeah. I will always say it until someone tells me, until someone tries it and proves to me it don't work.
Yeah. There's a couple of other questions there. Mark Holmes has put, a lot of domestics don't have the room for 2 module devices. Well, you can get single module AFDDs now from most manufacturers, so that's not going to be a particular problem. And Gareth has put, why not have a plug-in version of an AFDD like the RCD plugs? And the answer is probably going to be the cost of them, because they would be far too expensive for people to actually buy.
Oh yeah.
The current pricing, which is, you're talking £100 plus for even the cheap ones at the moment. So
just on the screen there on the right, I've just gone back to it, sorry. So that's a single module. That's Electrium, Siemens, Wilex, etc. That's the module that they offer. It's one of the few compact ones, but there's a number of compact ones, MCG, etc. Everybody's coming out. I think Fusebox have got one coming out as well soon, AFDD.
Well, everybody's going to need to make one now.
Yep. Everyone's going to need to make.
If this is becoming a shall, everyone's going to have to make a device.
So this then brings us back to how do we know, or do we have a common framework for what these AFDDs do? Because we've looked at them, John, and do you remember we started a little spreadsheet where we were looking at all the different data that they provide and what boxes they tick as far as compliance. And it was quite interesting to see how there were subtle differences. So how do you then best pick the best AFDD? Because it's slightly different. Do I have one? Because one of them, if we remember, John, it doesn't look at series arcs on the neutral. How many burnt out neutrals do we get?
Yeah.
Quite a few.
There's definitely differences, and there's also differences in the way that they actually indicate the type of fault, because some have got red LEDs and some have got different colours, some have got amber ones, and some have got flashing different colours and patterns, and there's no consistency between them at all at the moment.
I completely agree, and this is why I would suggest to guys to hold out for a bit until the industry gets this info on it. Eddie Clements has just used poetry. EBADS and engineering. Oh, you're a poet. Stop it. Beautiful words. So yeah, engineering judgment, as we said at the start.
Yeah,
right.
It's evident that the industry is going to try to nurture us to take AFDDs on board. They need to.
Well, I don't think there's been many fitted yet, because of course they're optional and they're really expensive, so no one's buying them.
There's only literally been about half a dozen pictures I've seen of one installed.
I haven't installed
through my feed. So.
I think when the 18th edition came out, people were more interested in trying to understand surge. And surge, as we know, we've all gone on a journey together with surge protection.
Let me just share these results to this poll before.
Oh yeah, of course. Sorry.
and
Yeah,
then
so
and let me double check the questions. So,
Ooh.
so do you think AFTDs are of benefit? 28% yes, 8% no. So there's technology there. Do they cost too much? 50%.
well, they do cost too much at the moment.
Yeah.
However, once they're sold in bigger volume, then hopefully the price would come down. But
are they of benefit only when engineering judgment deems it necessary? That's a strong, yeah, and I think that's where we've come to with this. If engineering judgment says they're necessary, the regulation isn't really written that way. I mean, that list of things is mind-boggling.
Okay.
All right. I just want to double check the questions, make sure, because Peter asked if there was any data on the use of AFTDs in Germany or the USA. We've read loads. I read loads from the USA when I did my video 2 or so years ago.
We have got
with what you get from the USA, because they've had
it's different completely.
similar devices for about 25 years, and some of their early ones were absolute rubbish, and they're completely different in how they work to the ones you can now buy over here.
So the first thing we learned when we went abroad was you can't compare the European arc fault to the American.
Yeah, completely
they're completely different systems, and the European ones are leap. I mean, the Eaton one was developed in 2009. That was when it was patented. So the Eaton one, to be honest with you, is probably one of the better ones I've seen. To be honest with you, it was quite interesting speaking to some of the Austrian and German scientists about miniaturization. Miniaturization has its own problems as regards to compliance with clearances, creepages, and
the guy at Eaton was very firm in his opinions of miniaturization.
Yes.
The AFTD they had at the time was 3 module though.
Yeah, this is the guy who rebuilt Mr. Ward's desk and apologised for it not being completely accurate. Yeah. I'll never forget that guy. Honestly, he was just it's incredible. But yeah,
James has put, is there a tester for them? And as I said, there isn't a tester for them, and you don't actually need a tester for them, because as well as the microprocessor in there that does the checking of the sine wave, there's another one which is only there to make sure the device is actually working and doing its stuff. And if it detects as a failure, then it will signal that in some way. It depends on manufacturers. And it's the same as things like, you've got airbags in your car, you never test them, but you know they're going to work if you get a crash, because it's the same idea of there's something monitoring it permanently all the time. So
this goes back to hearts and minds though, John, doesn't it? Because electricians always, when we had an RCD, you'd always be able to show the owner of the home, this is a device that will protect your family, and I'm going to simulate a short, and here you go, this is how quick it trips. It's brilliant. I've just proven to you it works. All you need to do is reset it and jobs are good, and you walk away. With AFTD, you're spending more money fitting and forgetting, and I believe there are devices now that can actually test AFTDs. I think they're out in America now. They need to adopt them for the European market.
They will exist, but they're going to be manufacturer specific, because what's in them is manufacturer specific. So if you get one that does an Eaton one, it may not necessarily be appropriate for something else. So
before we move on from AFTD, I just want to mention Carl's comment here. Carl is a firefighter, and he says, as a firefighter who has attended many white good fires with close escapes for families, he believes these are worth their weight in gold. It's an important thing to just read out, because, I mean,
I mean, they are, but I think it's shifting the problem.
It's shifting the problem, but I mean, what we can do, is...
I can't disagree with that. The only comment I would make to that is they are worth their weight in gold. However, if we are now no longer looking at leakage current values, these AFDDs, the RCB components, will be blinded still. And we don't know what the impact on DC overwhelming day type. Yeah, they're all RCBOs as well.
Yeah, no, do they do AFDD RCBOs?
There you go.
That's type B.
No.
That's what I was going to say. Do they go beyond type A?
No, they're just type A. Not that I'm aware of. In all the research we've done, I've never seen a type B one. Because the type B one will be massive.
Well, they couldn't do them. It's just there's probably no demand for them yet.
So if you had this situation...
Also, they're huge. You double the size of the internal gubbins for type B.
If you had a situation where you had equipment that required a type B, you'd have to then have a separate module AFDD from your RCBO, wouldn't you?
You'd be charging points.
Yeah, but you wouldn't use an AFDD. The technology is not mature enough for that yet. This is the problem. This is general socket outlets, white goods type stuff.
Yeah, but there's nothing in the regulations that says that.
No, it's just all
Yeah,
circuits.
I
isn't
can
it?
buy a washing machine that says a Type B RCD. There's
Yep.
nothing in the regulations that says don't put it on circuits that require Type B.
We'll get on to RCDs, but AFDDs conforming 6 are recommended for all other final circuits. So if you had a radial circuit with washing machines, fine. But remember something, if that's an inverter drive washing machine, yeah, and that's all that's working on that circuit, let's say it's 500 watts, the AFDD will not see the arc. This
Only,
is
yeah,
the
if it's
problem.
only, if
You
it's
need
only
a minimum
500
load.
watts.
You need a minimum load, and AFDDs are brilliant, but you need a minimum load on that arc. If you don't have that minimum load on that arc, they do nothing. They're just an RCBO, and a really expensive one at that. And this is the problem where energy efficiency has kind of impacted the AFDD market quite a bit, because they need a minimum level of energy to see that arc and understand that that's a serious fault. And that's what we're not talking about enough. But we'll kind of cover a little bit on RCDs as well. But yeah, I don't disagree with the fireman there. It's yeah, they are a good thing. Even if we are having the can kicked over our fence by the white goods industry, they are a good thing. We just need to really get good at selecting and erecting these, which means a lot of thought.
Yeah.
Right, should we move on?
Yeah,
let's move on, because we can talk about this for another half an hour.
So,
You can do if you want. What happens if a fire starts within a white good and AFDD won't find it? Potentially it won't. That's a problem.
Again, it depends on what current is being pulled through that AFDD. For
You're more likely the
trigger the device.
tripping. To be honest with you, if there's an earth leakage there.
The only concern is a series arc fault, really.
Yeah.
On that appliance.
Yep.
yeah, like
Right.
everything, there's different circumstances. No device is going to pick up everything every time. It's just how these things work. So
AFDD integrated into white goods rather than electrical installation. I'd love to agree with you with that, but the white goods committee sit on the AFDD. So 62606, which is the standard.
Yeah.
If you look at the makeup of the committee, it's all white goods manufacturers.
Yeah.
There you go.
anyway, so
Moving on.
to the risk of fire. Yeah, that's the one.
Risk of fire. So, precautions where particular risk of fire exists. Regulation 4221 general. So the first line is it remains the same. The requirements of this regulation shall be applied in addition to those of 421 for installations where locations where any of the locations of external influence described in 422.2 to 6 exist. Now, this is an interesting one, and I love this one, because I do a lot of fire safety stuff at work. I'm a responsible person at work. In such locations, the new part of the regulation, in such locations, the fire safety design of the buildings should be documented. Thank God. Finally.
Has BS 9999 been mentioned before?
We'll get onto it. But no, this information, well, it is in the opening bit, but it kind of
Not
just
here.
says, not here. This information should be included in a fire safety manual produced by or for the person responsible for the building. Good luck on a lot of buildings, because that responsible person may not even be well trained enough to realise that they should have operation and maintenance data. And the responsible person is detailed in the local national fire safety legislation or guidance, including, for example, BS 9999. So the legislation we're talking about is the Regulatory Reform Order of Fire Safety 2005, which places duties on the building occupier to manage fire correctly, undertake risk assessments, have control, cooperation, coordination, management controls. This has caused chaos since it came out. Henceforth, we've had to produce more British standards. BS 999 is a great standard. We'll cover that in a second. It then says the electrical system designer / installer shall provide the person responsible for the building with details of the electrical system, setting out the basis of the design with respect to fire safety. Now, interpretation of that one line, how much level of detail? It shall explain the operation of all associated relevant building services systems and give information on routine testing and maintenance requirements. Where it is determined that cables should have an improved fire performance, but are not covered by 422.2 and 422.6, this may be achieved by cables with a minimum light transmittance of 60% when tested in accordance with BSEN 61034-2, another standard to buy, and a limited flame propagation according to the minimum requirements of BSEN 60332-3, or where cable management systems are used cables to the minimum requirements at 60332-1-2. And breathe.
Yes, that I'll just explain what that light transmittance is. What that is, there's a test which is specified in that standard, and it's basically when it's set on fire, it gives off a certain amount of smoke, and it's how much light can pass through the smoke that's given off in the fire. So if you want to go and buy that standard, please do and read it. But it's another one of these £300 jobs. So yeah.
Take my money now, bargain.
I mean, cable manufacturers should hopefully adopt this problem for electricians to say our cable does this.
This is so imperative for safety, guys. Why are these standards not free?
Yeah, I mean,
it's not a national scandal.
They're referenced everywhere, and if you went and bought them all, you'd be looking at
bankrupt.
Massive amounts of money, wouldn't it? It's just
you'd be bankrupt. You'd be bankrupt. And this is the trouble. I've sat in very, very high level meetings and had people go, "Why did projects go wrong?" And I always say, you imagine starting an electrical contractor and buying every standard that you have to comply with. You'll be bankrupt before you lift up a screwdriver. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. But what I do like is there is now reference to BS 999. God bless this standard. So this is great. So just for those who don't know, JW does like setting fire to things. My interpretation of that is basically just use more fire performance cable, fire survival, LSOH. I think we're going to be walking away from PVC. I don't use PVC anymore anyway. I haven't for years, even in my own home. But BS 999 is part of a suite of standards. In the hierarchy of fire safety management, you'll have the legislation, the fire reform order. You then have the building regulations, part B. If you can't find or use part B, you then go down to BS 9999, which is fire safety and design management and use of buildings. You can then go to a quantitative assessment method, which is another British standard. But I personally am very pleased that this is now coming into the regulations, and I think it's fairly evident as to why it's coming into regulations, and that's probably post Grenfell. But for those who are thinking, oh bloody hell, there's loads more standards I have to learn, let me just give you an example of how these standards have always kind of interrelated. So the bit at the beginning of the regulations that says this doesn't include X, Y, and Z, but then says other standards will supplement this, section 110. If you look at regulation 56010 in the current regulations, fire detection alarm systems shall comply with 5839. You then go across to 5839, just here, and look in 3.7, commentary, the nature and installation work needs to be maintained integrity, installation practice workmanship need to conform to 7671. So what you have is this huge link between the two standards so that they both refer to each other. And I've always said at the center of that is stuff like part B, BS 999, kind of driving and defining and helping support the implementation of these standards, simply because of this shit cannot happen again. And the politicalization of it and the fact that we're years later and they still haven't got their act together is a national embarrassment, to be perfectly frank. The fact that they blame firefighters is a fucking disgrace. And to be honest with you, it just shows that this value engineering, this cost cutting, this cost saving, this layering and contracting, this application of CDM is a load of utter bollocks. There, I've said it. Sorry, I get emotional over these things. But yeah, so I think it's good. There's some work to do. I think that would be a good one. We have a fireman in here anyway. I think he has, I think that's definitely one we need to look at more. Now, it gets better for those of the fire fraternity. We've spent years slagging each other off, calling each other names for talking about premature collapse. Now 422 has changed. So regulation 422 was called conditions for evacuation and emergency, one of the more lesser read. It's now protected escape routes. And this is a new regulation. And what it says is cables or other electrical equipment shall not be installed in a protected escape route unless they're part of an essential fire safety or related safety system. Can you imagine doing an EICR in a building when this comes out? Hello.
Again, this is a whole other area of consideration.
Ooh, and you can see where Grenfell has influenced this.
You know,
absolutely influenced it. I don't see this as a bad thing. Now there's notes. So note 1, generally this means cables in a protected escape route should be limited to lighting, emergency lighting, fire detection alarm systems. Although cables for other safety systems may be necessary, hospitals may have special requirements. Now, a fire engineering approach, if you couldn't find another route, you would look at maybe, if you had sub-main distribution, you'd look at those cablings being fire survival within an enclosed area that's compartmented, or other methods and means. So this is what fire engineers are great at, by the way. They're excellent at giving really pragmatic advice. There is an Appendix 13 that gives more guidance, which is some decent guidance in there, but it states only cables that meet the following requirements shall be installed in protected routes. Resistance to flame propagation according to requirements of the relevant parts of 60332-3, or where cable management systems according to 1 or 2 below are used to the recommended requirements of BSEN 60332-1-2, and where a minimum of 6% light transmittance. Is it me, or is this just going to basically LSH? And by the way, note 1 and 2 are conduit systems classified as non-flame propagating, cable trunking and cable ducting systems classified as non-flame propagating, or cable tray and ladder systems classified as non-flame propagating, and power track. And that non-fire resistant cables need to satisfy the requirements of the construction product directives. Now, what about plastic trunking?
Well, plastic trunking has gone away, hasn't it, in this particular case?
Hang on. Dun, 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 dun. Fuck you, YT2. There you go.
You've got a block of flats and you've got all the plastic mini trunking in the stairways for the lighting. Well, that doesn't comply anymore, does it? Because it's obviously made of PVC. PVC, it gives off huge amounts of black smoke and hydrogen chloride and other toxic gases.
The key approach with this is obviously trying to identify what protected escape routes are. For electricians to be able to identify them on a site, to then, once they've identified that, refer to these. I still think some.
So there you go, guys. It's the death of PVC trunking in certain protected escape routes. Yeah. Now, I'm sure lots of people are going to start having a really big kickoff as to what's a protected escape route.
It's already started on the comments.
Oh, have they?
Yeah, it's already going.
It's in the. I think it's in the eye of the responsible person for the building. If you're commercial industrial, to be perfectly frank, I think in commercial industrial there's a level of common sense approach. In domestic, I don't think we have protected escape routes in domestic. To be perfectly frank, that's where we just.
The idea of a protected escape route is it must at all times operate as an escape route.
Yeah.
You know, think about theatres and things like that. There must always be a dedicated escape route, and it will must always be able to operate as an escape route.
Eddie Clements has said, "Would the client pay for this?" I would. I don't want to go to prison. This is all common sense.
Yeah, but you're not a typical client, though,
Oh, you shut up, you.
You have to find this magic well where all the other clients like you are. We can send sparks.
I'm trying to grow some. I'm employing some graduates.
Okay.
Put some common sense back into the world.
I'm just double check. I'm just looking to see. Right, yeah, there is a definition for protected escape route.
Fight. Okay, great.
All right, so the definition of that is a route enclosed with specified fire-resisting construction designated for escape to a place of safety in the event of an emergency. So there you go.
And an example of that is if you've got a block of flats, certainly some of them have 2 staircases. You've got the nice one with all the carpets and all the nice decorative bits. And then through a little door at the other side of the building, there's this horrible dusty concrete thing with nothing in it. And the concrete one is the protected escape route.
Yeah. See you, Connor. See you later.
Yeah, see you later, Connor. Sean has said, what about YT3? There we go. What code would this be if plastic trunking and escape route? Can of worms. I don't think there's a code called can of worms. I personally, would you C3 it or C2 it?
No.
You know what? If it's an escape route, I think I'd C2 it.
Yeah, C2 because if something sets on fire there and it burns all the trunking away and the corridor's full of toxic smoke, well,
that's the point.
It's going to kill people, isn't it?
You can't see an escape route as an empty, vast space. You've got to consider it being occupied by the persons that it's made for.
Yeah.
You do a code, and that wiring system has to be able to accommodate that external influence. So when you have a dedicated escape route, it's not as you're seeing it, it's when the number of footfall that's in that building are charging through it. That's when the wiring system has to be able to perform to its design. And when that is happening, you can conclude it's not going to be safe. It's got to be a C2.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also remember that escape routes are not always used when there's a fire. There are other reasons for evacuating a building. Indeed. So it could happen at any time, really. So
Yeah, and if anybody wants to do any more research of CPD, I'm sure there's lots of reports. Grenfell, Shirley Towers, and we're actually reading the reports for the deaths of the poor firemen at Shirley Towers is a very moving experience reading that report, because there's photographs, there's real reports, time-based reports on what happened and what occurred. If you then are doubting this, read those reports, and then if you're doubting it again, I would question: do you have a soul?
Yeah, I did. I've pre-programmed a couple of tweets. I've got one coming out in a couple of days. Just resharing the premature collapse webinar I did with my dad, because I'm still hearing people going, "Oh, it's only 30 minutes. It's only 30 minutes." People don't understand what a firefighting activity is.
Yeah, I know.
Right? In the guidance note, it says it's for firefighting activities. In the note, it's for firefighting activities. It's so frustrating.
You can see, now remember everybody, this is a draft for public comment. So this is a debate piece. This may not happen, but you can see where the industry wants us to go. That's the key thing. The industry wants us to get better at the installation of our cabling, so that if the worst happens, we're not killing people with smoke. We're not killing the fire brigade. We're not entangling people. There's some really simple principles that we can follow.
And there's a precedence.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple of comments there. Paul Bruton's put, what about all the cables on top of ceiling grids and open plan offices? Yeah, well, they shouldn't be resting on the back of the ceiling grid. They should be fixed up properly. So that doesn't comply now, and it definitely won't comply if this comes in. So, yeah, cables above suspended ceiling should not use the suspended ceiling as the means of support.
It's not designed as load bearing in that respect, unless it is. And even then, if you put lighting in it, you need to make sure that it's designed and it can actually cope with that weight.
Sean has put, so we're saying that data cabling and surface plastic trunking office passing through the stairwell will be non-compliant. Well, yeah, it would be, because it's plastic trunking in the stairwell. So,
and let's remember at the beginning that also includes data as well. You know,
it's fair to say as well, this is a chance for us all to have a good old moan up. Now, if you're going to watch the NIC or NAPIT or ECA's events, they're not going to be able to have the good old moan up that we can have, because why not? And I think the reason why we're going to have a good old moan up and we can vent in the comment section, forgive us on YouTube, because we want you guys to go out there and comment for yourself, because you can contribute to the development and improvement of their regulations. They're our bloody regulations anyway. We need to try and comment so that the industry listens to the people that want to have a voice and want to do a good job and want to feel like they're contributing more. So that's why we're doing these webinars.
And remember, as we said at the very beginning, this is on till December, so don't rush. You know, you can revisit this. You can wait until the website works better. We can revisit this and do or a Discord, whatever. You know, come back to it,
Ralph Magnus
do some research on it.
C2, companies will ignore it. 7671 is just a code. You're right, it's a guidance note. Get told this almost every day by procurement, value engineering people. I lost a friend in Grenfell. Oh dear. They use things like landlords.
That's the worst person, procurement value engineering people.
Procurement need to be told. So I'm actually trying to write a guide for people in procurement, because procurement, I agree with you, they are dangerous people. In rentals, they will always try and get out of it until it's made law, period. Sorry for the moan. I don't disagree with you, Ralph, to be honest with you. I feel sorry for you, mate, but yeah, I don't disagree. That's why I got so much snow on the mountain, all the rows. Can't see in the data guys using anything from plastic, usual story. Kenny, don't disagree, but we lead with our behaviours and we educate with the tools that we have. Nothing will change overnight. These regs don't come out and change. What would be great is if any of the industry bodies watching, because I know you're watching NIC and ECA and all that lot, get your finger out and produce some better fact sheets for homeowners and get them out to every single homeowner in the country, every landlord, every letting agent, and just spell it out on a little pamphlet that says, this is what a decent contractor will be telling you, not just whatever's cheapest.
Yeah. I mean, they know who they've got these people on their address book already, because they've gone to them to say you must use our members.
Yeah, it's great using.
Go to them and say, and also this method of work should be used.
Yeah, and also it's interesting. If the one of the comments that keeps coming up in this, forgive me 1 second while I just. Oh, my computer's broken again. Come on. So one of the interesting comments keeps coming back up about data, guys. It's fairly evident that there is this. Love to hate relationship with data installers. So if we look back at the origins of 7671, let me just go into the right section. I think it's 110, which is the inclusion in scope. Circuits provide to. You know where I'm going with this, guys, don't you?
Standard.
Yeah, so fixed wiring 11012, fixed wiring for information and communication technology, signaling control, including fiber optic. How many data installers produce a minor works or an electrical installation certificate to say that their data cabling meets the intent of 7671? So if you want to have a good fight with someone in comms world, there you go. Because I ask my data installers for a certificate to tell me that the circuits they've installed comply with 7671.
There'll be somewhere in any standard they've got to work to, there'll be somewhere a mention of 7671, and it'll basically say that it has to adopt or work along the fundamental principles. I had the same discussion earlier on just today with 7909. You know, they have their own areas, but when it comes to the foundation that is 7671, it's got to comply with those fundamental principles. In the case of things like data, you're looking at the erection of your wiring systems, breaking of fabric of buildings, and things like that as well, and obviously your compatibility issues.
Yeah, we'll try and get through some of these questions. What's the view on plastic wall plugs? They have their place, absolutely, but not in anything that could collapse above your head. General rule of thumb I grew up with was London Underground, and that was you could use a plastic wall plug on like something small and lighten it. If it fell off, it wouldn't cause injury and harm. Everything else, I would use metal.
They're not allowed on the Underground, are they?
They are, but only for like little small poster frames,
right, and
stuff like that. Anything like containment or electrical systems or cabling, it's fire rated Chemfix, studs, Unistrut, the whole lot. Only for small little things, poster holders, poster frames, leaflet holders.
The things that aren't going to prematurely collapse and entangle a firefighter.
No, exactly. It'll just fall on the floor and they can step over it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay, should we move on now? So that was a good debate, everyone. Thank you for that. Over voltage control. I think we're going to skip this, aren't we? Because over voltage control.
We're skipping.
We're skipping because it's been rewritten and it's just a fecking embarrassment.
It's just worse than it was to start with. Really.
It's worse than what it was to start with. It starts with 2 notes. Who starts a reg number with 2 notes? But we'll go into that tomorrow. And we'll skip that straight into part 5. So tomorrow we'll come back on that. Part 5. Oh, hang on. Sorry, this is my fault. So part 5, let's just introduce those because, again, this could be a number of people watching of various levels of knowledge. So chapter 53 introduced types of RCDs. So we introduced in the 18th edition different types. Type AC, which is identified by that lovely little waveform, and we all know and love the Wilex device there in many a double pole breaker. Type A, which offers up to 6 milliamps of DC protection. Type F, which offers up to 10 milliamps of DC protection and deals with high frequency connected loads. And then type B, which offers up to 10 milliamps as well, which deals with every type of DC waveform, whether it be constant or chopped or high frequency, etc. Once you go to type F and type B, you're looking at 500 to £1,000. You can't put them in the same board as an AC and a type A, so it gets very, very complex. And at the moment, I think the default for most people, we've been saying for a long time, Dave, has always been type A.
I'm actually looking. I put that video up on YouTube on the April 2019. That's when I put that video on YouTube about it.
I've been rambling about this for years.
Yeah.
My bugbear. So there we go. So this is the new regulation on RCD. So 531.3.3. Now, I'm not going to quote you the whole regulation, but note 3. John, do you want to just read that out while I'm playing around on my computer?
Yeah. So we've got this is the old one, isn't it?
This is the old, is it?
Yeah.
No, this is the new note in 531.
Note 3's wrong then?
Is it wrong?
Right, well, basically what it used to say was, for general purposes, type AC RCDs may be used, which is what it says now, and they've now altered it by removing a single letter, which has a huge impact, and it now says, for general purposes only, type A RCDs may be used. So basically, type AC is going away.
I apologise, chaps. I've realised I've made a mistake on that. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So, yeah.
It's crazy. It's just AC. One little line through the
letter.
C.
Yeah,
it's all they're going to do with that, but that's a huge change. You know,
this is what happens when you put a PowerPoint together in the day, in the afternoon of it coming out. You make mistakes. So yeah, that should say type A. So there's a surprise, guys. So that looks like when this comes out in 2022, we could then possibly code maybe Type AC.
Well, that's going to be the next awkward question they're going to have over the next couple of years: is how do the CPS guide electricians on what actions to take when they see Type A CRCDs?
John, do you want to read the rest?
They're still to this point not trying. They're not telling us not to use them.
So I should have put the entire reg in, but it was massive. So I've just took the key points.
Yeah, what it actually says now is that for general purposes, only Type A RCDs may be used. Type AC RCDs shall only be used to serve fixed equipment where it is known that the load contains no DC components. And that says C note 4, which is underneath. And basically, there aren't any. It's electric heating and filament lighting, which basically nobody uses anymore. So
so filament lighting, electric heating.
And be careful with electric heating, because virtually all electric heaters now have electronic controls in, because of that Lot 20 thing that came in a couple of years ago. So the instances of having an electric heater, which is just an electric heating element and an on and off thermostat, is pretty much zero these days, unless you've got a really old one.
So Aaron says, so only an immersion, maybe?
Yeah, that's probably about the only
pretty
thing.
Much. That's pretty much where you're at with that, isn't it?
So, yeah, so basically, Type AC RCDs are gone.
Yeah.
Dun, 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 dun,
And this is something we've known. This is something we've been talking about. It's something that's going to happen.
Well, most countries got rid of them 20 years ago. So, like New Zealand and Australia.
John,
Germany.
can I throw something at you? My dad still has filament lighting.
Well, I suppose it exists, but
there's still lots of places where it exists. But again, we need to code and inspect our installations based on the connected equipment. So we need to understand that. Now, I've just realized I've made a huge boo-boo, because there is an additional note 5, which states, for guidance on the correct use of RCDs in household and similar uses, see PD IEC TR 62350. So by the magic of my mouse not working, let's see if this works. No, it doesn't. Okay, Dave, I'm sure I put that slide in. It's evidently gone.
What's that, mate?
The one, no, evidently, right. So if you go on our Instagram, there's a lovely little slide that talks about PD 62305.
You did put that in there?
I'm sure I did, but it's evidently disappeared somewhere.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, or maybe it's mixed up. Guys,
we've
been writing these. Yeah, the one with the leakage on it. It's somewhere. Evidently it's disappeared off of here, but I did have a slide that showed the actual formula.
I'm sure we'll see it in a minute. Maybe it's behind your foundation earth
it's probably found. Yeah, it's probably behind the foundation earth electrode. So Type AC, it's having its day, it's having its death now. There's lots more discussion on this for how do we code it, how do we approach it. But it's nice to see them acknowledging that the connected installations are affecting the ACRCDs.
Yeah,
it's bad because there's not enough guidance or information for the installer to make a better informed decision, other than get a clamp meter out and start measuring. And John, me and you were talking the other day about earth leakage of products. There is some great guidance out there from Schneider, but if you want to buy all of the standards, the product standards, to find out exactly what the leakage is, it will cost you about 24 grand, which I don't have, to be perfectly frank. So yeah, that's just a
question on this AC one, this AAC. We've hinted that it might be that in the future we're going to have to look at EICRs when we find an installation with an AC. The equipment that's there at the time might now warrant the consideration for a C2, potentially.
Yep.
If that equipment that is there is definitely blinding and impacting the effectiveness of the RCD, making it redundant.
We've put the videos on,
right.
You know.
Is that going to be something that you see coming in a 10-year kind of culture? Maybe when there's evidence of more and more and more equipment doing that? Yeah. Or do you think they're going to do, because they're not going to do that straight away, are they?
No, this is an emerging and developing thing. And let's be honest about it. If you go back in time 5 years ago, I was the only person, one of the few people in the country waffling on about RCDs not working. It's taken us many, many years. That rig, we've taken it around the country to colleges. We've introduced it to our friends. We've explained what we know, the limits of our knowledge. We've sought to increase our knowledge. In the same time, we've realized that this is a known issue, and it's now slowly creeping into the regulations, which kind of validates the research that we have been doing. We can't just fix select and erect installations. We need to start asking questions about the fixed components and how they mutually interact. Because let's be honest about it, somebody bought, it was on Twitter a couple of months ago, a coffee machine, and that coffee machine required a Type F RCD. It's like £1,000 just to plug the thing in. Separate circuit. Hello. How do we get to that? Inverter drives. They want Type A's. A boiler, which I found, which was a Valiant one. Type B for a boiler. So we could potentially, and again, the manufacturers need to give us more transparency, be connecting loads. I mean, the Schneider manual talks about a maximum 10 milliamp leakage from cookers. Well, that completely kind of defeats the 9 milliamp maximum limit on circuits. So by trying to understand this, I genuinely think, and I'm going to ask it as a comment, can we have an appendices in a future wiring regulations that lists out all of the common products and what their leakage is, so that the electricians, when we're selecting and erecting, can be informed as to how to make good protection decisions? Because if we have an installation where we've got 20 milliamp leakage on a circuit and it's DC and it blinds that RCD, then you're better off having a frigging nail in your board, or just going back to fuses. So walking away from RCDs and just having cartridge fuses, because that would offer you just as much bloody protection. And that's the problem. Are we over RCDing everything? And you know, we've had this conversation, Dave, with certain people very senior in the industry.
Yes.
Does the electrical industry need to seriously conduct a review as to the implementation and application of RCDs, given the fact that connected loads can cause performance issues? That's
the thing is, you're gonna install a new home now. You're gonna put in an A-type RCD, but you can't say it's gonna work if in 2 years' time, homeowner's gonna buy a cooker that needs a Type B.
Yeah, this whole thing about RCDs is a bit of a mess, really. But
it's not home safe.
The takeaway from this is that Type A, C are going to be going away permanently, and it's going to be some other type, whether that's Type A, FB, or whatever other types come along. So
I think the default's going to be Type A, and I've always recommended this for a number of years now.
Well, the default will be, but the problem is homeowners don't know about selecting equipment and looking for.
They won't care.
Type. No. So if we say a system is safe for continued use, we give it a 5-year interval or a 10-year interval, there needs to be some guidance to homeowners about this element of risk if all we're going to put in is Type A now.
And David, did we not in our future M6M1 identify, as Sean has just put, we aren't over RCDing, we've simply not sufficient access to the correct types. Australia and New Zealand banned them a long time ago, the AC type. We know Austria, Germany, Denmark, loads of European countries have banned AC RCDs. Are we just like extinguishing stocks or something?
There seems to be someone needs to answer the question as to why we are so far behind with that.
Because we're not a governed or regulated industry. That's the problem. This industry is steered by the will and wants of manufacturing, period. And if you think otherwise, then I'd love to have that debate, to be perfectly
But with that in mind, Eaton, Schneider, they could have brought AFDDs and these devices to us 5 years ago. In that sense.
Oh, if you look at it, MK and a number of manufacturers were producing these on a commercial. Well, MK, my house, the board in my house at the moment, my old house, that's actually Type A RCBOs, and that's nearly 20 years old. So Type A did exist, and Dave, we've researched this. They were available in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
They just weren't really put into the general population of knowledge.
That's so annoying.
So, there you go. Right, moving on.
I'm just going to go through the chat briefly.
Sorry.
So, Sean says, electrical safety first, can't even provide the correct coding advice for non-compliant EV installs. So, there is an issue with that. Terry says, Type A has been in 7909 since 2008, so why has it taken so long for 7671 to come in?
Sean's made a good point. Type A isn't a blanket answer. You're right. Yeah. It's a default working from, but I agree with you, sir. It's not a default answer.
But that's the problem, though. This industry wants blanket
scary
answers.
Conversation, though, isn't it, Sean? It really is.
Just wait till we get to Part 8 and some of the stuff in there. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
There's some great guidance. It's worth reminding the guys who want to know more about RCD. Schneider have just released a new product catalog, guide to RCDs, and Eaton have a very good one as well, which has just been updated, and there's tons of information in there.
I was going through the Schneider one just again last night after my AFDD CPD, and it goes through. It's got that table you put on Instagram with all the little leakages. It goes through a lot in there. It is time for us to do extra CPD with RCDs. It's not just a device in a box now.
It's very true.
All right,
moving on.
Moving on.
Drum roll. You can tell by the picture, foundation earthing. So this is something I was doing 12 years ago. So there is a new regulation. It's a UK specific regulation, and it states, for new premises, guys, constructed upon foundations, each building in which there is an installation using the protective measure of ADS, formerly known as EBEDOS, shall be provided with one of the following: a concrete embedded foundation earth electrode in accordance with Annex A542, or a soil embedded ring electrode in accordance with Annex A542, or an equivalent earth electrode such as that afforded by metalwork of a steel framed building embedded in concrete foundations in contact with soil. A value of resistance to earth not exceeding 20 ohms shall be provided by the earth electrode, or collectively where the electrodes of 2 or more buildings are connected together. The earth electrode shall be connected to the main earthing terminal of the installation by a main bonding conductor of that installation. For the purpose of this requirement, for an installation in a multiple premises building, aka flats, the protective conductor of the service line or distribution circuit supplying that installation shall be deemed to be the main bonding conductor. In dwellings for outbuildings such as detached garage and sheds, an earth electrode in accordance with 1, 2, or 3 need not be provided. Now, just for everyone wondering why an earth bonding conductor, it's because this is about managing that rise in potential for STEP. This isn't about earthing the fixed installation, because when I first saw this, I thought this is by definition an earthing conductor connecting the fixed installation in. No, it's not about that. It's about equalizing step voltages and stuff.
Yeah, so it's like a bonding conductor to earth.
Yes,
because there's an earth there.
Wait a minute, does that mean we could end up being prosumers and have island modes, and this could all be linked to island modes and prosuming? So for those who have done smart homes and microgeneration and PV and all the rest of it, pay attention tomorrow, because this piece of the jigsaw is all getting linked. And also, one interesting thing, the value of resistance to earth not exceeding 20 ohms. I have a letter, and you can Google it, from Ofgem to the Wiring Regulations Committee from about 12 years ago, that says to them that they should not be recommending 20 ohms as a value, that they should actually be working at the rising voltage under fault, which never made it into the wiring regs, and that came from Ofgem. So I don't know why they didn't do that, but we'll cover that in DNO webinar part 2. We'll have that on the screen.
Andrew has put a link in for that Schneider document we mentioned, the earthing guide.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, 20 ohms is far too high, and then really it's just nonsense. I don't know why I put it in there. And if we go back to the lovely ECA's questionnaire, because there's a bit in here, it says one of their questions is, will fitting foundation earthing on a new build project be feasible? And then the answer is, of course, yes, because in most cases, new build houses or whatever other buildings are going to have foundations of some sort anyway. They're going to have concrete in them. They're going to have steel reinforcement in them. So, of course, it's feasible. And in a lot of cases, in fact, in virtual cases, the additional cost of connecting to it is going to be pretty much nothing. So this is not something that's going to cost huge amounts of money and take loads of time to do. You're already putting most of the stuff in the ground anyway. Basically, it's just making a bit of it accessible, as we've got on the pictures here, so you can actually attach to it in some.
Yeah, so this is a visual example where we had, this is actually Crossrail. This is the connection for a transformer for all the LV earthing at the western portal entrance. And there was a piled wall being constructed of around 260 piles, about 1.8 meter wide, 24 meters deep. As you can imagine, it was just fantastic to connect to. And what we did was we connected one clamp, stripped a 300mm conductor, one on the vertical and one on the horizontal of the pile cap, wrapped it in Denso tape, left a little label, which was laminated so that it wouldn't get ruined by damp, just to make sure that people knew what it was and what it done. And then we made a nice little access chamber before we tarmacked all around it. And there you go. So that was the earthing connection for the sub.
It's a bit generous.
It was incredibly generous, but then again, if you're an electrician and you want to get in there and do some work, give yourself some damn space, man. So that's exactly what we did. So do you think something like
this would be put into new homes?
Well, not like that. That's more industrial, but you would probably have the square pots, or the principle of that accessing of the mesh itself. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You'll need to do some form of connection. Now, I know there's a school of thought that talks about welding connections. This is one that obviously needed to be maintained and checked and all the rest of it. Yes, 24 meters deep, Cam. Yes, very deep, huge, multi-millions of pounds worth. Held up the A40 flyover, funnily enough. Gareth Murgatroyd said, would this not be the DNO responsibility? Sadly, I don't have a bottle of Teflon, but if you can imagine a DNO meeting, they spray themselves in Teflon and just say, not my problem anymore. Which if you watched our DNO webinar, you'd kind of get that subtle hint. So yes, I thought there's some pictures.
So yeah, it's putting this in is not a big deal at all, despite what the ECA might think. It's something which is probably already going to be in the ground anyway. The only additional cost is some kind of access tub or pot or something, so you can actually get at a bit of it and make your connection there with your appropriately sized conductor, which is Harrison said in the comments, 10 millimeter. 10 millimeter might be a bit small, even for domestic. So might want to think about something a bit bigger there, but anyway, sized appropriately for the installation, I think is the answer there.
Yep.
But yeah, new build, it's a minimal trivial cost.
This is new builds.
Yeah, we're not suggesting you should go into existing places and start digging up the floor and
lift it up, and I mean, if this is obviously keeping in mind things like islanding or a potential for islanding or other protection, if we start converting existing properties to prosumer, how is that going to be adopted, or is there an alternative?
That's where it's difficult, and there may well be alternatives, which we may look at a future date.
Okay.
Maybe even tomorrow, John.
But yeah, so this, although it seems like a big load of bother, it's not. It's just about someone at the time of the foundations being poured in actually bothering to put the plastic cover or whatever in so it can be connected up. That's all it is.
Yeah.
So, not a big
So
deal.
I actually made them smash this out after they'd poured and it had all gone off because I wanted decent access, and then made them put this chamber around it so there was space and all that good stuff. Wanted to give the guys a chance to have access to something good. So yeah, okay, so there's some pictures. We thought we'd show you this, it's definitely worthwhile looking at. And again, as we said, prosumering.
And the intention here is thinking about the idea of prosumering and islanding. Is that correct? And the idea
that's
of bringing
part of
potential fall up to the ground, like bonding the earth to your system.
Yeah, there's that, and then there's also the thing about the broken pen conductors and all that stuff as well, and things like electric vehicle charging being outside. It's all part of the same rich tapestry of things. So.
Yeah, sounds like we're just like
just for everybody on this, by the way. So Michael Peace has asked the question how the rebars join together. So rebars are normally built in a cage form, and they use twisted wire to form that cage and bend the rebars. They're then put into place and then just shuttered and concrete poured. You can get, if you're doing this in a domestic, you can get benzonite. There's this new product called Conducrete as well. And we also know about the Condu-Disc, which is an alternative to rods, worth having a look at. It's certainly an alternative technology. We'll be doing a podcast on that very soon as well, which will be out, I don't know, later in the year.
About the size of these, in theory at the moment, if it's a domestic, then it's going to be a 10 millimeter because it's basically a bonding conductor. However, the thing to consider with this type of foundation electrode, you're going to get a very low resistance, typically in the sort of 1 ohm kind of range. So if, say, there was a broken pen conductor, think about the current that could flow in that circumstance. So it might be an idea to size this conductor, say, matching the size of the neutral that comes in. So there's a 16 millimeter neutral coming in, put a 16 there. That's not actually in the regulations, but it's something to consider because you could get fairly substantial currents flowing through this in certain conditions.
Dean's made a comment, weld connection, no need for pit. I would still want an access, because if you just bury something that's welded and there's ground movement, etc., condense, vibration, it could over time come loose. So I'd always want access to this sort of joint. It's too important not to. Can DC corrode the connection? Yes, massively. There are lots of car parks that are built with rebar near to DC railways, and then the concrete falls apart because you pump DC current through this. It will corrode like a bleep. That's a whole different talk unearthing in itself. But yeah, Dave, we can talk about that
It
offline.
justifies accessing it to verify it.
It does indeed.
Yeah.
Right, there we go. I knew there was a additional.
I knew
slide
there
on
was something
RCDs.
else.
Apologies, I shuffled them around.
Yeah.
Right, let's just quickly go back to RCDs. So as we mentioned earlier on, apologies guys, this is literally, we've winged this so quickly, it's mind-blowing. Additional requirements in IEC TR62305, that's a copy of the standard there. And there is a formula that says you can work out leakage, which from the sum of connected appliances times 0.75. The table 1 is all you get in that standard, so it's the formula and some basic appliances, but we know from the Schneider document there is far more to this.
Yeah, I mean, this is just an example use. The Schneider gives you a much more exhaustive, detailed list, isn't it?
Yeah,
And this is a technical report.
Yeah, the Schneider document, which was on Instagram, I think, the other day. It basically, someone at Schneider has gone through a whole list of different standards for electrical appliances and picked out the individual bits for each one and then put them into a nice table. So well done to whoever did that at Schneider.
Yes.
Wasn't it like £24,000 if you're going to go and buy
24 grand if you want to buy them. So I'll be doing penny for the guy for the rest of the year on the railways. Although,
yeah, that table on the screen there is only a very, very rough guide. And if you look at the individual types of equipment, it can be wildly different from that. So
it can. Plus, more importantly, guys and girls, 2006 this was written in. So technology is moving quite a bit. It would be very interesting to see this updated based on the information in those other referred to standards. Because I think what you'll find is if you apply this now and use the information in the Schneider document, you would be going down the road of individual RCVOs.
As you said, though, we wouldn't have a problem with this if manufacturers had to obviously provide this information with their product.
Would be nice, manufacturers. Hello, give us the info. Or put it in an appendix in the regs. Because electricians will use it then. They could be a great handy design reference guide.
Yeah, it's another example of stuff that's hidden away in all kinds of standards nobody's basically heard of and completely inaccessible just due to the gigantic cost of getting them. So,
indeed you do. Okay, so leakage currents, staying on leakage currents. This one I have left in because I thought we'd kind of wind this up on real controversy. And real controversy is this. So this has been deleted by BS 7671, Regulation 54371-201. It was UK specific. And it's equipment having a protective conductor current exceeding 3.5 milliamp but not exceeding 10 milliamp shall be permanently connected to the fixed wire on the installation without the use of a plug or socket outlet or connected by means of plug and socket compliance 6030902. It's now gone.
Yeah, well, we need to join some dots right now because it's like we've not mentioned yet from part 4.
Okay.
And let me just get to it when the website, which is very, very fast, obviously, gets me there.
Incredibly fast.
Like treacle.
So obviously we're familiar with RCD selection, that it gives us the ability to assess risk to then not have RCDs in the current standard.
The 10 milliamp rule.
Yeah, see, this is hinting on we're getting rid of this. We need to right now just remind everyone that in part 4 in ADS, I'm just getting to it. Just before the bonding.
Is it 431 something?
Somewhere. No, it's in an ADS. Anywho, I can actually just probably quote it out loud anyway. So when we obviously select our CDs, there's part in the regulation just before the tables in chapter 41, which I'm at now. Here we are. And it tells us about the need to select our CDs. And for additional protection, and it says, here we go. So this is 411.3.3. Additional requirements for socket outlets and for the supply of mobile equipment for use outdoors. And it said in AC systems, additional protection by means of an RCD to 30 milliamp will be provided for socket outlets with a rated current not exceeding 32 amp and mobile equipment with a rated current not exceeding 32 amp for use outdoors. An exception to the first one, socket outlets not exceeding 32 amp, was permitted where other than in a dwelling, a documented risk assessment was in place. Yeah, it used to also be that we could have labeling for a specific use. Yeah, we used to be able to label it for a specific use. They got rid of that in the 18th edition, but they allowed us to carry on assessing risk. That's now been scratched out as well.
Yeah, do you know what? I missed that. Apologies. Yes.
Yeah, there's there's no mention right now as a way of putting in a socket outlet up to 32 amp without an RCD.
Yep.
So I thought I'd just cover that because this is coming
Which
to this.
is a crock, because we should be able to write a risk assessment to determine we can't have RCD. So that one I'm going to be saying, sorry, no, you don't tell me how I select and erect my installation. I use your guidance note. And if I want to risk assess it out, I own the risk. You've told me yourself that this compliance with this standard isn't necessarily anyway compliance with the AWR. The risk on the duty holder is always with me. But yes, you're right. It does link into this deleted by amendment without a doubt, because it also links into the regulation that covers the leakage on each individual circuit not exceeding 10% of the rating of the RCD. Why would you need 3.5 to 10 milliamp anymore on a reg? You don't need it. So it's effectively gone. There is also one last thing. This one here, this is rowed about so much, guys. 543712004. It's another UK reg. This has also been deleted, and it's where two protective conductors are used in accordance with 543712003. The ends of the protective conductors shall be terminated independently of each other. So this is the socket outlets, high integrity earthing. Each other, all connection points throughout the circuit, e.g. the distribution board, junction boxes, socket outlets. This requires an accessory to be provided with two separate earth terminals. Gone.
Yeah, I mean the key thing here is it's trying to protect you from exposure of potential of up to 10 milliamp.
Yep.
Yeah. That's not a problem now because we have to have RCDs. And if we have to have RCDs to 30 milliamp, we know with selectivity that we're not allowed more than 9 milliamp on that circuit. So because we have to have no more than 9 milliamp on that circuit, it doesn't require as much harsh protective conductor current regulation because we don't have that potential because we're not allowed to go over 9 milliamp. So that's why this has been changed. That does mean, however, though, that if for some reason you were to depart from 411.3.3 and still put in a socket with no RCD, this regulation wouldn't be safe anymore.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, this means they have no intention of you getting away with not using an RCD.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
It's an RCBO because the whole idea of an RCD and covering multiple circuits just doesn't work with the 9 milliamps thing.
And they've added that to selectivity, haven't they? You know, thinking about RCBOs on every single circuit in domestic. You know.
So this kind of just leaves me with this thought. Hang on, if it works. This is me being stupid now because we've been at this 2.5. Dr. Ian Malcolm, great guy, complete theory guy. You were so preoccupied of whether or not you could, you didn't stop to think if you should. And that thought just came to mind with some of these improvements. Now, the wiring rigs have to change. They have to improve. They have to grow. They have to adopt for technology. I am past challenging the fact that this comes out every 2 or 3 years. I accept it. I embrace it. But some of the changes, where are the electricians giving that vital feedback? Where are the trainers and the teachers giving the feedback? Where are the contractors giving the feedback? I'm not talking about the ECA, the NIC, because they'll always give their polished feedback. I'm talking about the real shop floor people, the guys teaching the future generations.
Yeah.
Where is it?
It's important. Remember, they have to align with other companies and other people's input.
And that's kind of where we stop.
Yeah. We're going to crack on with part 6 first tomorrow, yeah?
Yeah, part 6, part 7, and part 8 tomorrow.
Okay. I mean, part 6 and part 7 is going to be fairly brief. I'll probably knock them out in about half an hour to 40 minutes because we need to give a lot of time to part 8.
Yes.
Indeed.
Having finished writing part 7, and John, you've done an amazing effort with part 8, mate.
Well, I've got to finish
It's all
part 6.
new.
John, you've just hit a home run with part 8. Part 8 has just melted my brain this afternoon.
All right, so guys, if there's anything else you want to ask away. If you want us to cover anything, we can mention it. I'm going to look at the Q&A.
Yeah, if you want us to go through any of these pictures or anything like that, then go back over anything.
Right.
Just please ask.
Connor asked a question, but I think he left because he had to go early. So I'll ask it because he's going to watch this on YouTube. So I'm going to ask you a question, Connor. So I'm pretty sure you left, mate. Does 7671 book come with Amendment 1 now, or do we still have to buy that separate with the blue book? Because is it still, so if you get the book, do you still have to buy now that £5 download, or does it come with one in it?
I'm pretty certain you have to get it separately because I don't think they changed the actual printed book at all. It's the same number and everything as before.
If I would have known these questions, I had a little button that goes ka-ching every time a cash register going ka-ching.
Yeah. So no, I'm pretty sure that they're still separate. It's
you
like
don't have to buy it. You can download the free one, which just has "do not print" all over the front of it, but it's the same content, so it's not a big deal really.
Okay. Damien, anyone else struggling for sound? Oh, was there sound issues, Damien? Has the audio been okay, guys, in chat?
Nobody else mentioned the sound problems. So
That's right. Yeah, really... Damien, it's you, mate. Hopefully. Well, we'll find out when this goes on YouTube.
Yeah, sorry, we kind of went to the questions last because we got this, but if you have any issues, just shout it in the chat. We'll see it.
Sean Mitchell, audio kept dropping out. It's because where you live, mate.
Okay, well, we'll have to check the recording and see. Was it all of our audio? That's interesting.
It probably depends on who it was watching and how the networks things work. So, yeah.
Okay, cool. Michael says, Hep2O have metal inserts.
Yeah, that's the stuff.
Yes. Quite a soft metal, though, isn't it? Quite a pliable.
Yes. Yeah, and also the metal bits go inside the pipe anyway, so they're not normally accessible to the...
So, I mean, if you've got a plumber that's installed Hep2O and it's now readily accessible conductive parts, I don't think he's done a good job.
Yeah.
So, it's everywhere, mate.
Left the insert.
Hep2O is everywhere. It's a plumber's friend.
Yeah. Oh, I had my old house. We replumbed with it, and it leaked after 2 or 3 weeks, and the plumber never came back. The bastard.
Do you know why it leaked?
Yeah, because he took the inserts out of the I got another plumber to come in, and he took out this T connection, and he says he hasn't put the inserts in, the olive, whatever they call it.
Yeah, that could be the reason then. Yes.
Yeah.
Bit of a fail there. So. The Baltic Whiskey Beds, but how big a fuse box we need to now fit with their feed in mind? Well, pretty much the same as we're fitting at the moment, because we've got those single module ones now from several manufacturers. So although the Eaton one initially was that big fat 3 module, and then there was the 2 module ones, single modules are going to become pretty much the standard deal.
I agree. So, I mean, the Eaton one was a great device because it showed the technology and it was very easy it was clear, but it's just not realistically practical.
Yeah,
especially in the UK. In Europe, boards are bigger.
Yeah.
In Europe, they are bigger. And yeah, they are. They are always going to be bigger, and that's the trouble. We are going to have to accept the fact the board's getting bigger. I mean, yeah, AFDDs, you can get them in single module, but remember, guys, it's not about the size of the board. It's about how we select and erect this stuff, how we consider the use and the application of the availability of the protective measure. That's the key thing. Now, I just see on the questions here, Steve Devine is in here. Is this Mr. Devine of the IET? If it is, hello, Steve. How are you? If it is you, please fix all of these mistakes in the book. There's so many. It's mind-blowing. And also get the BSI, give them a kick up the arse to fix this absolute treacle we've been wading through all bloody day. Because I've got a stonking headache. So I have 0 Fs to give.
Yeah, some other ones there. Paul Bruton mentioned about pollution categories. What was that? So, Paul, that because that's your kind of area.
A brief cover now, Paul.
Oh, God. So pollution categories, there is a pollution category 2, pollution category 3, and it is to do with the electromagnetic environment of which you're installing the protective device. The simple, easy way of putting it is 60898 versus 60947-2. They are 2 different types of MCB. One is tested to a more harsher electromagnetic environment, and it's more robust within external influences. And basically that's kind of really the difference. There's differences in Ka ratings, etc. But when you go inside of it, it's about creepage, damp, resistance to moisture, corrosion, all sorts of stuff. But more importantly, electromagnetic fields.
Some devices comply with both, and it'll be good if you look at that. If you look at that, look at one that complies with both, but then you'll see how they differ. The 60898 will achieve certain criteria, but the 60947-3 might achieve more, and that gets you a bit of an understanding as to where the category has that impact.
So there is a paper. Dave said there is a paper. It's just literally Google 60898 versus 60947. It's a tale of two stand. Now we have, and if Deepak is still watching this, Deepak promised to get the author of that report onto our podcast. Still waiting, Deepak. I'll call you tomorrow. So yeah, we need to get that in a podcast before the end of the year, because that is a fascinating subject. Me and Mr. Skirm have got to talk about that anyway on EMC issues, because it means the difference between a device working and a device not working. So if I put
again, mate, that is an area that we need to help electricians get an understanding of. We can completely understand again about AFDD. Yeah, so I'm going to keep poking at you for that one.
Eddie Clements has put postage down LinkedIn. I'm not the type of person that will slate a company publicly.
Yeah.
On this occasion, I left note. I believe system BSI use for 7.6 is extremely poor, slow and clunky. I believe very non-inclusive company. Many find reading poor quality websites hard. I have actually, so today at 1 o'clock, I rung a lady at the BSI and said that the current system is in breach of the Equality Act of 2010. And I had the exact same conversation in 2017. And the reason being is I had a really lovely old 60-year-old Spark who wanted a printed copy in A3, didn't like using computers, and it was just bullshit that they've just ignored all those lessons learned, which is why they produced a PDF, and they've just ignored everything from 2017, which shows you BSI are not fit for purpose. There, I said it.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. I've been in email communications with them regularly lately, looking at finding solutions to get these documents available for electricians at a more affordable price. They just want they just want me to profiteer from it, and I'm like, that's completely not what I want to do.
How the hell can they have an institute that's under a Royal Charter that defines standards for public safety and then put them behind a paywall? It is unethical. In my personal opinion.
It's not going anywhere soon. David said, looking for a DC tester that will work to detect DC. Any suggestions?
Fluke have got a couple of good ones.
I mean, there's different opinion here. I'll speak on behalf of Mr. Skirm, because when we have this chat, he says, they don't do true DC. I think there's an
No, it's because Skirmy is Chauvin Arnoux all the way, and I've had Chauvin Arnoux out looking for DC on my railway. It's very difficult to pick it up. It depends on the clamps and the mechanism in the clamp. That it has to be designed to pick up and detect DC, and it's all to do with these weird little widgets, and I can't remember their names, in the end of the clamps, which are able to pick up DC and then convert that and transpose it in the device. I think I've got a Fluke 317 or 318.
Yeah, Hall effect sensors is the thing you're looking for.
There you go.
That's the name. Yes, good man.
So
the Mega 305E earth leakage. Yeah, that's pretty good. How are we supposed to make an engineering judgment then? Gather all the facts, read all the standards where you can that are available, and make an informed opinion while you're selecting and erecting. But Richard, if you're asking if we don't have the standards, how can we make an informed opinion? Then I would argue that we need to nationally form a petition to ask the BSI to make standards that affect public safety free. They will never do it because they are a for-profit organisation, which is ridiculous. And if someone in the government had any common sense and realised that, they would probably kick them up the arse.
There is a thing you can do with some of the standards. If you look for, say, the standard number and you just search for that, you can often find like sort of guides written by manufacturers which just give some information about that particular standard. So you can get sort of bits of information from things in various places.
Richard M. Sorry, John.
But the actual ones themselves are obviously horribly expensive, whatever. But certainly, if it's a thing that's used quite often, you can often get from, say, certain manufacturers. I mean, Schneider's got a vast amount of stuff, so you can often get sort of bits and pieces out of it and get some general idea of what it's actually on about. So.
Richard Emery's put a good comment. How are we supposed to make an engineering judgment? No facts or stands on DC. I probably should finish this. So I have actually some training material that there is lots of standards on DC. They're just buried. So there is BSEN standards on mutual interaction of AC and DC. 50122-3, I think it is. There is, DC leakage. Oh, sorry. No, there's virtually jack. I tell you what, there is, me and John were looking at this yesterday, weren't we, John? There is a device that will measure this, and I'm hoping to buy it very soon. I will put a picture on Instagram. There you go.
It looks interesting, but
I can't wait to play with it.
Further information required. So.
Further information required, and I'm going to buy one and play with it. So, yeah, I'll let you know.
A couple more questions. Peter says, come across a property with plastic coated metal pipes for an oil boiler,
right?
Or not?
Yeah,
plastic coated metal pipes.
You need to be careful with those because It depends whether they're extraneous or not, because some oil tanks are made of plastic, in which case, very unlikely to be bringing potential in. Of course, some oil tanks are made of metal and they sit on the floor. So, yes, it will. If you're going to bond oil pipes, you can't use the standard 951 clamp because they don't go down to the small diameter. So you have to get special small ones. And of course, you need to remove a part of the plastic coating.
So this will all really depend on, obviously, if the boiler itself is in contact with the earth to provide that extraneous reference that may go through the pipework inside that plastic.
It also depends where the boiler is, because quite a lot of oil boilers are outside. So obviously not applicable there. So like everything else, it depends on the situation and whether it's extraneous or not, whether you can actually get at it, and there's other things. So yeah, they might need it. And if you do, you'll have to get the special little tiny clamps for it, because it's only like 8 millimeters or something diameter to attach to that. So
I mean, could you just do testing maybe to kind of determine?
Yeah, you can, just to see if it's extraneous. But bearing in mind that if it's going to the boiler and the boiler's connected to the installation through the mains lead, you're going to have to disconnect that first, because obviously it's still connected. So yeah, can be a bit of a bother. Ideally, you want the situation where it's a plastic oil tank and then it doesn't apply because the ends aren't attached to anything, so or anything conductive. So.
All right. Richard says, so high protective earthing is now obsolete. Older installs with or without RCs can contain 10 milliamp or higher, so still applies. An RC won't trip at 30 milliamps. So, well, the thing is that regulation wants us to shed down these loads to less than 9 milliamp on RCDs.
Yeah, I mean, that 9 milliamp thing is in there now. Bearing in mind what we're looking at here is a draft and proposed thing, so that may or may not come in. But
yeah, it won't make much sense. That's the problem of it. Yeah, I think it's just the stuff below 10 milliamps. I think above 10 milliamps, you'll still have to take steps. I think it was only just the alteration was just on that part.
Yeah, I'd assume over 10 milliamps you'd have to have some kind of form of protection, but that won't go on an RCD because of the
there is actually a
regulation.
There is a regulation still that requires a notice for high protective conductor current.
Does it specifically mention socket outlets, or it could be fixed equipment?
Hang on, let me just check. Oh, this is like treacle.
It's so hard.
It's so tedious to scroll up and down. I don't know why they designed it. I mean, obviously, it was designed for things with 6 pages or something, which obviously probably work better. But
those are the dots. They've obviously taken away the ability to assess risk about omitting an RCD. They want us to always put in RCDs for sockets up to 32. Consequentially, that means that the RCD selected now must not go over 9. So the regulations
543. Yes, they've deleted the equipment having a protective conductor of 3.5 milliamps. Yes, that's deleted, but exceeding 10 milliamp is still in there.
Does it say socket outlet?
So equipment having a protective conductor current exceeding 10 milliamp shall be connected to the supply by one of the following methods: permanently to the wiring installation with the protective conductor selected in accordance with 543.71203, a flexible cable with a plug and socket, provided that the protective conductor of the flexible cable is of a cross-sectional area not less than 2.5 for plugs rated at 16 amp and not less than 4 mil for plugs rated at 16 amp and above. That's actually a new little bit in there as well. And then they've deleted the bit about the 2 connections.
Well, that's not going to align with the unwanted tripping regulation. Interesting. Fun. Right. Sean says, surely if we use the data tables for appliance leakage, then all offices would require high integrity socket outlet circuits. If we added them all up, yes, I guess the issue is obviously you may have to apply diversity to that.
I think either way, the subdivision in the installation is just going to keep going on. It's something that we're gonna end up RCBOing stuff. And now that we know, because remember the diagram we showed at the start of this about the method and measure. So if I go back to that diagram in section 2, where is it? Right, there we go. So look at the way we generate now, yeah. So if we are having battery storage and all sorts of shenanigans, the amount of leakage that is being produced from the installation, the amount of influence on the sine wave, everything we're doing in this installation is changing. Years ago, it was really simple: resistive, inductive loads. We consumed, we used. That was it. Yeah. The only problem that all of this had, this national grid, was dips when we were switching on. Now look at all the switching issues we have. Now look at all the harmonic issues. Now look at all the various voltages that are being chopped and pumped back into the system. This is why this whole smart grid, this is why these smart meters want to take control of things, is to try and regulate the grid before it just goes bang and catches fire. This is this G55 thing as well.
Which somebody put a link up, which was good.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, cheers, Wayne. See you later, buddy.
There's a couple one in the comments a while back, actually, when Jake Bennett's put regarding the rebar earthing, says installation will be TT rather than TNCS or TNS, or is this in addition to DNO earthing? The deal with the foundation electrodes is that it's going to be in addition to what the DNO has provided. So it's going to be a TNS, no, it's going to be a TNCS supply to your property, and then the foundation earth electrode is going to be connected to that. So it's providing that additional path to the true earth rather than just relying on what they're providing.
It wouldn't become a TT because obviously your supplier, that references the electrode at the supply end.
So it's additional to that until you get to island mode, in which case then the earthing type can actually change. And
because you and Yao are the source, aren't you? So.
Yeah. So, but yeah, generally though, it is connected to the TNCS.
We may have the EIC forms in 10 years that go source of supply TNCS/TT with an island node effect.
Yeah. That won't happen. We'll always pick the worst. We'll pick the worst.
It won't be TNS. Yeah, it won't be TNS because there is no TNS anymore.
You'd have to consider both if you're going to have those two sources of supply.
Yeah, but you'll pick the worst case scenario, and we'll cover that why tomorrow.
Yeah, C part 8.
We'll cover that why tomorrow. C part 8 for tomorrow's going to blow your brains, guys. Honestly, it's going to blow your brains because I've been through this today with John Ward, and it's melted my brain. It's what's giving me my headache.
Well, let's wrap this up because some people are going. Raphael's got to get up at 4:30.
No worries.
In the morning, and he's on tomorrow night. So
thanks, everyone.
We'll be back same time tomorrow. We were a little bit late because obviously we were doing this frantically this evening. We'll try to be a little bit more punctual tomorrow night, but we'll resume with 6, 7, and 8, mainly 8.
Yeah, we'll dip into 4. We'll cover Surge from 4 tomorrow, and we'll cover a few bits in 5. We've missed like the labelling because there's a lot of labelling.
Yep.
All right, guys. But any other questions? There's Discord. You can talk away in there, or you can message us. And
we'll go into Discord.
All right. Cheers, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.